Ahmed, do you hear me?
Hello,
Whoa, Ahmed, do you hear me?
I'm hearing you. Do you hear me too?
Ahmed, do you hear me?
Hello, John. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
That's great.
Okay, can't see you. There you go.
How
How you
are
doing?
you?
How
I'm
you
doing
doing?
well. Doing well. How about you?
Good, good. I'm ready for a good one.
It's great.
You're gonna like NOOR. She's very good. Okay, I'll be back.
Okay. Harshad. الله يفتح عليك يا Harshad.
Hi, Harshad. Yeah, hi, Ahmed.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You know, I prayed for you. You know that in Arabic.
I can hear you very well. How are
That's
you?
good. I'm doing very well. By the way, are you a neurosurgeon?
Yes, I'm a neurosurgeon from Mumbai, India.
Oh, that's great. Could I get your WhatsApp contact, please?
Yeah, you can
You
write
know,
it down.
you can do it. You know, I'm an admin of many neurosurgical WhatsApp groups. You
Or you
know,
want me to write on
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Do it.
I've got my. Do you want me to message you on a chat box,
Okay, you can type
or
it
you
now
can
in the
write?
chat. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. I'm a senior neurosurgeon here in Mumbai. Since last many years, I'm here.
It's my honor to recognize you.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, you can type it now in the chat.
Here we go.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Good.
I've done.
That's great. Okay, just a minute.
And Ahmed, if we had to grade students, we would grade Dr. Harshad an A. He comes to all the lectures. He comes to all the lectures.
Yes, I attend all lectures. I'm a front bencher.
Well, he's an active participant and he asks questions and gets involved. It's great to have people like that in this platform.
You know, we can plan to do a lecture with him.
Yeah. How long have you been practicing, Harshad?
Now almost 25 years since my practice and total experience of 35 years now.
Great.
I'm in neurosurgery since 1985. Me and
okay.
Atul Goyal, we are same batch. We are classmates.
They had neurosurgery before the internet?
Yeah, 1985 we started, me and Atul Goyal both. We are from the same city.
Are you in the same hospital or no?
Just now, yes, we are in the same hospital.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I thought you were in a separate hospital.
Today only I bumped down him.
You know Harshad? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You know,
I can hear you.
That's great. I added you to to a neurosurgery group in WhatsApp. You can double check it now.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I'll do that.
Hey, Warlocks, are you there? I guess you're muted, Warlocks, right? Oh.
Hi, John. There is someone called both Neuron. I want to just talk with him.
Hey, Warlocks.
Yeah. Hi, bro. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Okay, that's great. I mean, someone called Prof. Narayan, I guess.
Hello.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
That's great.
Yeah, good evening. I
Good
think
evening.
I've been getting this repeated request, that I should be part of the panelist. I don't mind. Reason is, that it's already 9:30. I'm not dressed up to be, presentable. That is the reason why I decline most of the time.
Oh, okay, you're in the hospital, Warlocks. Okay, you can't talk.
No, it's so in the sense, working hours are other things I can, unmute and speak without showing my this thing face, because working hours, I can come definitely live. I am professor of neurosurgery in Jabalpur, India.
Okay, that's great.
Next time, say suppose if it's 3 or 4 hours earlier, then I don't mind presenting my face, and then they'll be presentable that time.
Okay, as usual.
Huh? Okay,
Uh,
thanks.
Good
By the
morning,
way-
everybody. This coffee's for you. It's
Oh, thanks.
Einstein's coffee in Miami Beach.
Thanks.
What,
It's quite sunny here.
you guys drink tea, right? In the Arab countries? You don't drink coffee, right? It's mostly tea?
Yeah, John, the
Yeah.
best coffee in the world is the Yemeni part, or the Yemeni coffee. You know that?
Okay.
Historically, the best coffee in the world is the Yemeni coffee.
Oh, yeah, really? It's good, huh?
Yeah. It's called Buka or something like that.
Buka?
Something like that.
Oh, okay.
No,
Well,
we
we're
drink-
all gonna meet in the Zoom lounge after. We can talk about it.
Okay, of course. By the way, I want to just invite all the attendees now that the next lecture will be with Prof. Salman Sharif.
Okay, let me take the screen sharing off here. So you'll go to the person. So yeah, we have an announcer that is going to host a student from Peru. He'll be here shortly. Here's NOOR. Here's the Queen. Hello, is that NOOR?
Yeah, that's great.
Hello there.
Hey, NOOR.
Hi, sir.
Welcome.
Hello there, sir. Hello, Ahmed Al-Khanimi. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me here.
Hey, look, NOOR, usually we have horn players signal the arrival of the speaker, but the horn players has a vacation.
Really?
They're off. The horn players are off for Christmas.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It's already been holidays for the Christmas. Yeah, exactly.
No, like just to explain, you're going to do the webcast, and after the webcast, we're doing another Zoom called the Zoom Lounge. So
Exactly.
people can meet you and talk to you in private. So it's not in public. So
Exactly. Like the last time in the EWRC webinar.
Yeah. You know it. So
Yeah.
we'll do the regular webcast the way we do it. And
Exactly.
then after all the questions are done and after Ahmed's done, then we'll say, okay, let's go to the lounge. It's a private. I don't publicize the link to anybody but the people here in the panel.
Exactly. That's great. I like the idea already. We have a competition as well, so we will announce the results.
Oh yeah, you want to talk? Yeah, you can talk about that now or after the beginning, whatever. Or I could probably most appropriate at the end, right? Let's do it at the end. Let's do it at the end. Okay.
Exactly. Right after the lecture, I guess that we should proceed with the announcement of the winners. So just
Okay, Ahmed, have you got the winner and everything of the contest? Have you decided?
It's up to NOOR.
Yeah, I had a preliminary list of winners. Actually,
I see. So you pick, right, NOOR?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll know today who won.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Good.
Ahmed is very brilliant. So we've been in touch and we've been discussing all the matters. So mashallah. So everything was
I think one of the contestants is listening now.
Really? Where
I'm not going to prejudice. I'm not going to prejudice your judgment. I'll let you be totally impartial.
Oh yeah, I'm impartial, but the basic thing that I do believe in is to try to encourage people to take interest in all these academic activities and all these things, so that we need to motivate them. We need to show them something to do. In that case, they will be able to have to show more interest in in listening and in learning. And obviously, when you draw, you learn a lot. So I think that this should be not a not a strict competition, rather an activity to motivate your colleagues, your residents, especially the medical students. It's very important. Like when I go back and I think about my own medical school days, I think that were some things that were missing. And if they were there, it would be a much better experience for all of us in learning and everything. So later on, when I was a student, my sister got me a workbook back in those days. So it was a wonderful thing. I used to draw on it, I used to color it, and I learned a lot on it. And I still have that workbook for brain in with me. I guess that this would be very wonderful. I have a paper on it as well. I will share it later.
Okay.
Yeah. You've been doing amazing, it's all because of your efforts that we are all on the virtual platform. Otherwise we would be missing out on everything, each and everything, and we would lag behind in those previous 2 years of pandemic.
Well, Noor, virtual communications are going to increase now. Now this pandemic looks like it's not going to end.
Yeah.
So I think it's the virtual living and communication is only going to increase because of the isolation we're going through, and it's getting better, then worse, and better and worse. It's not going to be quickly.
Yeah,
it's going to end.
Yeah, exactly, and we're quite used to it. And it's sometimes I think that is very much more easier because many of people of the resident age group and the medical student age group do not even are not even allowed to travel. They do not find the leave and sometimes the visa in time. So I think that is a wonderful idea to be here so that you cannot miss anything.
What's it like in Pakistan? Is it restricted travel, or is it pretty free and you just wear a mask, or what's it like there?
Here, the incidence is remarkably low. Even in our city, currently there are a few cases of Omicron, about a couple of cases where, confirmed cases. One of the patients ran away. She fled from the quarantine, but our situation right now is not that bad, although Omicron is obviously here in Pakistan. We are expecting maybe later this month or basically in January or the mid of February, we are expecting, but the situation is good. A few countries are in the block list of Pakistan, and obviously Pakistan is also maybe we may not be able to travel to certain countries, although we can travel to majority of them because the incidence is quite low here, and the vaccination rate is also quite high. People are getting vaccinated, even even children, they are also getting vaccinated. So things are good. Let's see how long we can keep it. But people are a bit, careless in that manner that we are still having large gatherings and everything. Nothing is banned right now in Pakistan, although they have asked us to have a higher level of, to be alert of the Omicron spike. So personally, we are following strict rules at our home and in our workplaces. But most of the people are like they have forgotten about it at all.
Do you have any videos in your presentation, Noor?
Yeah, it's there. Do you want me to share it now?
Let's go through it real quick to make sure it works okay.
Well, I lost a few slides. I lost a few slides yesterday. I was in a panic because a few slides which I had to make. Can you see? Can you see it?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so it's running. I think there are a few animations out there, a few GIFs, a video. I really didn't want to go into depth for medical students. I didn't want to create a lot of confusion or something like that. So, but however, I was able to add a few
Yeah.
surgical, yeah.
Oh, that's nice. That's a nice video. Oh, okay. So that's a no-brainer video.
No,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, you just put the slide on and it plays. You don't worry about it. That's good.
Oh, I have a lot of stuff to talk about, so I just placed this image to emphasize on it a few interesting points as well, and a few research points, images from the Rotten's collection. Um, these are all things, and examination finding as well. I didn't. Yeah, because I think that this would be good in clarifying certain concepts. You can see this, what I want to say. So it will have a clear image. If you go through the slides again, if the
Okay,
screen,
Nora, any more videos or no more videos? That's it, right?
just one video of
Oh,
neurosurgical.
okay. Don't worry about it. Okay, we're about to start. Hold on.
Oh, yeah.
She's Ahmed. What am I going to do? The announcer didn't even come. The host to introduce you. It looks like I'll have to introduce you. Okay.
Oh, sure, sure.
Because this is a regular school day, med students.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not surprised, but we'll just improvise.
No, it's amazing. It's wonderful. It's okay. I think you I guess that you and Ahmad are the basic aces of this program. So you should go along with that. It would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Ahmad, how are things at your end? How's the COVID situation in Yemen?
It's somehow tough, but inshallah, it's gonna be better.
Inshallah, we also have high hopes that things will be okay. But I think that people need to cooperate a little more, especially regarding wearing of mask. Many people consider it useless and are not using the mask. And this is something I think that they should consider.
Okay, we're about to start. Nora, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm going to introduce Ahmed first. And Ahmed, you're going to introduce Nora, right?
Okay.
Basically run the show. And after Nora's finished, the question, you moderate that too, okay?
Okay.
Okay, ready, Nora?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, 10, 9, 8. So, let me take the pin off. The pin's off. Okay. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Good morning. This is Dr. John Bennett broadcasting from sunny Miami Beach. This is real sun coming through the window here on me. I'm glad to introduce the YEMEN Neurosurgery Grand Rounds. And Ahmed is going to moderate. Before I turn it over to him, let me just tell you that after the webcast, we're having what's called a Zoom lounge, where NOOR is going to come in a private setting. Ahmed's going to be there, and hopefully panelists will be there to interact in a private setting. But first, we'll do the slide presentation. Welcome, Ahmed.
Hi, Georgian. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Here is Ahmed Al-Ghanimi, the president of Walter Idan, the Neurosurgical Student Club of Yemen. I'm also an officer in Abdur Rauf University of Neurosurgery. Before I take the pleasure and privilege of introducing our guest speaker, please allow me to express my gratitude to Dr. John Bennett for his contribution with the Yemen. Our guest speaker, Dr. Noor Al-Huda Maria, is a neurosurgeon and researcher from Pakistan. He has a fellowship in endoscopic spine surgery, and he is also an author of 3 books. Now I will give the mic to her. Hi, dear doctor.
Hi, thank you so much to both Dr. Ahmed Al-Ghanami and Dr. John Bannett. And it's a matter of huge pleasure and honor for me to have the privilege of being invited at this wonderful platform for this amazing event. And I really want to thank you, all of the Medical Student Club Yemen, for this huge privilege. And you've been doing amazing, really. And it's so impressive to be so much enthusiastic about neurosurgery at your stage. And I really hope, and I'm certain that all of you will ace in achieving your dreams, inshallah. So again, thank you so much. Let me share my slides now. Can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So again, a huge thanks to the Walter Reed and the Medical Student Club Yemen. It's a matter of huge pleasure for me to be here and to be invited by you. It is really a matter of great honor for me. So a big thanks to all of you. And again, I want to appreciate all the efforts of Dr. John Bannett in promoting virtual neurosurgical education. And I also want to admire all the efforts that the Dandy Yemen group has put in making virtual education so much helpful, informative, especially from the perspective of medical students as well as the residents. I also want to say a huge thanks to all the resources of information and collection of images. These are precious sources of learning and education. So these are the suggested learning. I will come to it later on. The topic of my lecture today is the anatomy of cerebellum. The objectives of learning the basic anatomical organization of cerebellum, to learn the functional roles of cerebellum, to understand the organization of the layers of the cerebellar cortex, and to appreciate the clinical manifestation of cerebral lesions. I will try to teach it in a sense that you can actually correlate all of these together in a very meaningful way. So that will be helpful for you to understand as well as to remember. I don't like to be anything to be grammared. If you have a clear concept, I do believe, then you can actually learn everything by heart only by seeing it and without any need to grammar it. But I really want to say that you really have to go through the matter several times, basically to create that circuitry in your brain that reverberates every time you recall the matter. But if you have a clear concept, it is much easier for you to do so. So cerebellum at a glance, the term cerebellum literally means the little brain. It is located in the posterior cranial fossa, separated from the cerebrum by a fold of dura, which is known as the tentorium cerebelli. It's known that the compartment that is below the tentorium is known as the infratentorial compartment. This is another term that you should be familiar with. It is located dorsal to the brainstem and separated from it through the cavity of the fourth ventricle and connected to the brainstem by 3 pairs of cerebellar peduncles. This relation is very important from the surgical point of view as well as from pathology. So this is something that you should learn. Look, you can see here, this is the cerebellum and this is the cavity of the fourth ventricle, you can see. Okay, and these are the cerebellar peduncle. This is the superior cerebellar peduncle that is connecting it with the brain, with the midbrain. This is the middle cerebellar peduncle. You can see it. Later on, we will study it in detail as well. It is connecting it to the pons. And the inferior with the medulla, you can see these are the peduncles that are connecting the cerebellum with the brainstem. And cerebellum and the brainstem are separated with the cavity of the fourth ventricle. Like the cerebellum has a superficial layer of gray matter. The cerebral cortex and the inner white matter, which is referred to as the arbor vitae, or its branch tree-like appearance. It is the cerebral white matter, and deep in the white matter there lies the masses of gray matter that are referred to as the intracerebellar nuclei. In the cerebrum, this crevices are known as the sulci and the elevations are known as the gyri. In the cerebellum, these are sulci and folia. So we are, instead of saying gyri, we will say those elevations. We will say folia instead of gyri. In cerebrum, the elevations are known as the gyri, while in the cerebellum, they are known as the folia. So this is something that I want to share here. It organizes and sequences the agonist and the antagonist and the synergistic muscle contraction to regulate the rate, the range, and the force of movement, resulting in smooth contraction of voluntary muscles with coordinated action. The cerebellum plays a very important role in smooth, coordinated voluntary movement. So whenever there's a lesion in there, as we will see, there will be disturbance of this coordination. Cerebellum has no direct pathway to the lower motor neurons, but it exerts its control via the cerebral cortex and the brainstem. So keep in mind, it does not contribute to motor power very directly. So it has, through the connections with the cerebral cortex and the brainstem, that's how it regulates this movement. Each cerebellar hemisphere controls muscle movement on the same side of the body, the ipsilateral side, and it's very important. And it is in contrast with the cerebral cortex. So just keep that in mind that it affects the same side, ipsilateral side. The cerebellum consists of two lateral hemispheres which are connected by the midline structure known as the vermis. Across the cerebellum comprises of two surfaces which are demarcated by the horizontal fissure, and there are two notches and three well-demarcated fissures. On the superior aspect, there is no limit of distinction between the vermis and the hemisphere. If you have that sample, you can go to the dissection hall and you can see that superiorly, you might not be able to make it. You cannot have a very separate distinction between the hemispheres and the vermis, but inferiorly, the two hemispheres are separated by the deep depression known as the vallicula. You can see here in the image, if you can make out, this is the vallicula. From the vallicula, the vermis lies in the depth of this depression. So you have a better demarcation over here. On each side of the vermis, it is separated from the corresponding cerebellar hemisphere by the paramedian sulcus. Okay, so you can see these are the two hemispheres, the midline vermis and the vallicula. That is basically here you can make out the vermis in a better way. So this is human brain sample. That is two hemispheres separated by the midline vermis, two hemispheres. This is the primary fissure, which is the deepest one, okay? And whatever lies interior to it is the anterior lobe, while the part that lies posterior to it is the posterior lobe, okay? You can see it. So when you are holding it, you should be able to make it that the deepest fissure here is the primary fissure. The part that lies anterior to it is the anterior lobe. The part that lies posterior to the primary fissure is the posterior lobe. And this is the horizontal fissure. What is the importance of horizontal fissure? The horizontal fissure basically demarcates the cerebellar surfaces into the superior surface and the inferior surface. The deepest fissure in the cerebellum are the primary fissure, fissura prima, running transversely across the superior surface, and the posterolateral fissure seen on the inferior aspect. I'll show that later as well in other slides. These fissures divide the cerebellum into three lobes. The part anterior to the primary fissure is the anterior lobe. Part between the two fissures is the posterior lobe, sometimes also referred to as the middle lobe. And the remaining part is the flocculonodular lobe. The anterior and the posterior lobes together form the corpus cerebellar. These are further images you can relate with the diagram, the simple drawing as well. So you can see this is the cerebellar vermis. Here in the image, you can see this is the cerebellar vermis. This is the human brain sample that has been, preserved and made out like into the section hall. Left hemisphere, and this is the folia. This is the folds that the folia, the folds that have been thrown, the elevations. This is how it works. And you can see this is the primary fissure, the part that is lying anterior to it. This one, the bluish one, is the anterior lobe. And the part that is lying posterior to it, here it is shown with the beige color. And here, posterior to this primary fissure, this is the posterior lobe. It is the biggest one. And this is basically the sagittal view. If you just get it sagittally and you watch it sagittally, it's also important in the radiograms. So this is the sagittal view where you can see this is the human brain. You can see it here. This is the anterior lobe, and this is the primary fissure. You can make out here. This is the primary fissure, and this is the part anterior to the anterior lobe. This is the arbor vitae, and this is as you make out this primary fissure. Part posterior to it is obviously the posterior lobe, and here this is the small flocculonodular lobe. These are the cerebellar nuclei that you can see. And later on, I will show it in other pictures as well. There are clear views of them. And this is the pattern, the frond-like pattern that resembles that of a fern leaf. This is the arborvitae. That is the white matter that has been arranged in such a way with the folia overlying it. So this is the arborvitae. This is the radiogram. You can also relate with it. I wanted to have you, or to have all of you have a clearer view of it. This is the, sorry, the mouse is running a little. This is the cerebellum. You can see again, this is the primary fissure. This is the, you can see it is very well demarcated. It is going deeper. This is the primary fissure. The part anterior to it is the anterior lobe. The part posterior to it is obviously the posterior lobe. And this is the little one is you are going over here is the floccular nodular lobe. The cerebellum nuclei are masses of, this is a white matter arranged in the frond-like manner, which is known as the arborvitae. And here you make out that there are masses of gray matter. The cerebellum nuclei are located over here. This is the cavity of the fourth ventricle, and what lies anterior to it is the brainstem. Obviously, you can see here. Okay, I'm now going over here. This is again, you can again appreciate this leaf-like pattern, the arborvitae. This is horizontal fissure, and this is the central lobe. You'll see, I will just go through it in a detail, so you can actually make it out in the same image over here. And this is a more detailed image. I will just explain it with the relevant slide. Primary fissure, dorsolateral fissures, floccular nodular lobe, the arch cerebellum voltus. Okay, I will just go through it. Arborvitae, I have made a clear view of this as well. Please let me know if there's any ambiguity till now. Is there any ambiguity till now? I hope everything is clear.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, yes, it looks perfect.
Yeah, thank you. Well, fun facts in the adult, the weight of the cerebellum is about 150 grams, which is about 10% of the weight of the cerebral hemispheres. And despite the very small size, the cerebellum has almost 4 times as many neurons as the cerebral cortex. Because the presence of numerous fissures, the cerebellar cortex is much more extensive than the size of the part of the brain would suggest. It has been estimated that the surface area of cerebellar cortex is about 50% of the area of the cerebral cortex. This is just a quick overview, location and everything, the relation. I will just try to go show it with the pictures. So superiorly, you can go through it. This is the tentorium cerebelli. This is, so superiorly, you can see this is the tentorium cerebelli. The other thing which is not very, here is non-lingual gyrus and the greater cerebral brain that are located superiorly. Anteriorly, obviously, the brainstem and the medullary villi is there. Cerebral aqueduct, you can see over here. Over here, can you see it? This is the cerebral aqueduct, the corpora gemini, okay, the corpora, this is here, and the posterior cerebral medullary cistern, foramen of Magendie, and medulla oblongata, and foramen magnum. So these are all located anteriorly. And posterior laterally is obviously over here, the occipital bone, the sigmoid sinus, the occipital sinus, and the confluence of sinuses, okay? So you will go over here. So these are the important relationships. The most important thing that you should keep in mind is this fourth ventricle and the brainstem that lies over here. And because there are certain surgical entities that are relevant, so you have to look over here. So I think this is the clear here. This is again a whole image so that you can have a better view in comparison with the brain. It is the tentorium and it is the infratentorial compartment, the fourth ventricle and the brainstem. The lobes. Anatomically, the cerebellum consists of anterior lobe. The middle lobe, I have already told about it, posterior to the primary fissure is the largest lobe, in the floccular lobe below the posterior fissure. You can see these are the 3 lobes. The one in purple over here, the anterior lobe. The one in green is the posterior lobe, and the one in orange is the floccular nodular lobe. This is the primary fissure. This is how it is being oriented. So this is the primary fissure, and again, the part anterior to it is the anterior lobe, and the posterior to it is the posterior lobe. This is, radiological finding that you can see that the primary fissure has been demarcated over. This is the anterior lobe in orange. This is the posterior lobe in orange. Is the flocculonodular lobe. Cerebellum is divided by the posterolateral uvulonodular fissure into the flocculonodular lobe and the corpus cerebelli, which is further divided. The corpus cerebelli is the basic main part. The flocculonodular lobe is just here. This little one, this small one that you can see over here. And the flocculonodular lobe is located on the inferior surface in front of the posterolateral fissure and comprised of nodule of the inferior vermis and a pair of floccules, which are connected to the nodule by the pattern. And the flocculonodular lobe, also known as the vestibulocerebellum, is a lobe of cerebellum consisting of the nodule and the flocculus. The two flocculi are connected to the midline structure called the nodulus by the thin pattern cord. This is a horizontal fissure that demarcates the cerebellum into superior and the inferior surfaces. The subdivision. So here, I want to just emphasize that some of the fissures on the surface of cerebellum are deeper than the others, and they divide the cerebellum into lobes within which small lobules may be recognized. To show the various subdivision of cerebellum in a single illustration, it is usual to represent the organ as if it has been opened up so that the superior and the inferior surfaces can both be seen. So it is like this is a clamshell, and you have opened it. Here you can see these are the subdivisions. The anterior lobe has been subdivided into lingula, central lobule, and the culmen. Okay, you can see this. And subdivision of the cerebellar hemisphere. This is the vermis one. This is the vermis. Okay, these are the subdivision of the vermis. The anterior lobe of the vermis that lies anterior to the. Again, I will say that is the anterior to the primary fissure. This is the lingula, central lobule, and the culmen. Okay. This is the primary fissure. This is the anterior lobe, and this is the anterior part of the vermis that is relevant with the anterior lobe. And the subdivision of the vermis in the anterior part is the lingula. Okay, you can see over here the central lobule and the culmen. While of the cerebellar hemispheres, as you can see, this is it is a little ala over here, and the quadrangular lobule over here, and this is the primary fissure that demarcates that the anterior lobe has been entered, and this is the posterior lobe. So in the posterior lobe, the part of the vermis has been divided into declive, folium, tuber, pyramid, and the jovula. Okay, so here it ends. While on the if you go over here in the cerebellar hemisphere, you will go into lobule simplex, superior semi lamellar lobule, inferior semilobular luminar lobule, and obviously the biventral lobule. And then you go into the uvula and nodule. This is the flocculonodular lobe, and here you will have this. Okay, you can get this thing. So this is basically, and this is, this little thing is flocculus, and here is the nodule of the vermis, nodule part of the vermis, and this is the flocculus. These are the subdivisions. Okay, so this is further, divided part. Here you can, like I have said before that I will say it, you can see it. This is the central lobule part. This is the culmen. This is the primary fissure, the declive, folium, horizontal fissure, tuber, prepyramidal fissure, pyramid, secondary fissures, and uvula, nodule, posterolateral fissure. So this is the vermis division. So basically, you might find it a little confusing at first, but this is how it is being divided in relation with the lobes of the whole cerebellum. As the cerebellum has been divided into anterior and the posterior and flocculonodular lobe, similarly divisions there are further subdivision in each of the lobe, in the anterior lobe, in the posterior lobe, and the flocculonodular lobe. And vermis is similarly divided into subdivisions, like you can see over here in the anterior lobe. This is the part of the vermis. Okay, so don't find it confusing. Just relate over here. These are the parts of the vermis that are relevant with the lobes. That is, in the anterior lobe, you can find lingula, central lobule, and culmen. In the posterior lobe, declive, folium, tuber, pyramid, and jovula, and the flocculonodular lobe. Obviously, these are. So these are the parts that have been divided. The name of these parts are basically for the vermis. So if you can see, if it's not in the not in the hemisphere, it's the wormus. Worm-like structure, the wormus wraps sagittally around the center and marks the midline. The wormus is separated into a small anterior lobe and a much larger posterior lobe at the primary fissure, just like in the hemisphere we have studied, like the whole cerebellum. It applies on both of the anterior, posterior, and flocculonodular concept applies in the whole of the cerebellum, that includes both hemispheres and the wormus, and the subdivisions are little have a different name. It can be further subdivided into 9 lobules, which are formed by the groups of folia that correspond to the paired cerebellar hemisphere lobules. These are subject to variability in terms of their size, shape, and the number of folia. The anterior lobe, the lingula, central lobule, and culminal, then the primary fissure, the anterior fissure also. You might find a different nomenclature over here. There are different names for the same thing. Posterior lobe, bifolium, horizontal, petrosal fissure, tuber, prepyramidal, suboccipital fissure, and pyramid, uvula, flocculonodular lobe. That's what we have already. We have studied. And this is basically the 3D image of the wormus. On the superior aspect, there's no line of distinction. I've said before. On the inferior aspect, the two hemispheres are separated by deep depression of the vallecula. The worms live in the depth of this depression. On each side, the worm is separated from the corresponding cerebellar hemisphere by the paramedian. Pyramidal circle. Here you can see this is the entire thing. It is just a little thing that has been sandwiched between the two cerebellar hemispheres. But for all the practical purposes, you have to be very clear about it. In addition to the central vermin lobule, there are horizontal lobules that are assigned the Roman numericals, okay? The ones we have studied before. Don't find it a little complicated, just go through it and you will be able to grasp this concept. The quadrangular lobule, the H4-5, is located anterior to the primary fissure, that is the anterior lobe. Central lobule, as H6, situated between the primary fissure and the posterior fissures. Supralamellar lobule at 7A. The region runs from the posterior fissure to the horizontal fissure. So these are something that is we can quickly go through. And these are the things. Cerebellar notches. Cerebellar notches anteriorly and posteriorly. It has been divided into this anterior notch and the posterior notch. Anteriorly and posterior, the hemisphere extend beyond the wormus and they are separated by anterior and posterior cerebellar notch. So obviously the wormus is a little structure and the hemispheres, they bulge out like this. So here comes anterior space and here comes posterior space and notches rather. So anteriorly and posterior, the hemisphere extend beyond the wormus. You can see over here, you can have a good view here. This is a little space. The anterior cerebellar notch lodges the pons and the medulla, and the pons cerebelli lies in the posterior notch. Okay, you can go over here and you can see. So this is the concept of notches. So the 3 major functional roles, again, we are now going into functions, are the coordination of movement, the maintenance of equilibrium, and the regulation of the muscles. The coordination of movement, control the timing and the pattern of muscle activating during the movement, maintenance of equilibrium in conjunction with the vestibular system, regulation of tone, modulates the spinal cord and the brainstem mechanism involved with postural control. We will discuss it further in detail, okay? These are the functional areas. Clinical observation experiments use of the prefect scan, the positron emission tomography have shown that the cerebellar cortex can be divided into 3 functional areas. The cortex of the vermis influences the movement of the long axis of the body, namely the neck, the shoulder, and thorax and abdomen, and the hips. Okay, so this is you can see this is the vermis. This is basic. You can see it has been you can see in the photo as well, the neck area, the shoulder area, and the thorax and abdomen, and this area has been controlled by the vermis. And immediately lateral to the vermis is the intermediate zone, the so-called intermediate zone of the cerebellar hemisphere, which has been shown to contain the distal part. You can see over here. You can see the distal part of the limb, especially the hands and the feet. This is the hand part, and this is the feet part. This is the intermediate part, which controls the hand and the feet. While the lateral zone, this is the lateral zone, you are going to laterally of each the hemisphere appears to be concerned with the planning of sequential movement of the entire body and is involved with the conscious assessment of the movement errors as well. So I think I have discussed it, but Again, lateral hemisphere, motor planning of the extremities, lateral motor pathway that have been influenced to it are the lateral corticospinal tract. As we all know, that the lateral corticospinal tract is involved with the motor conduction executions. Intermediate zone is the distal limb coordination, lateral corticospinal and the rubrospinal tracts. The worm is in the follicular lobe. Proximal limb is the trunking coordination. Anterior, and it passes through the anterior corticospinal tract, the reticulospinal tract, the vestibulospinal tract, and the stachyspinal tract. The ocular lobe is obviously balance and vestibulo-ocular reflexes, and how it exerts through the middle longitudinal fascicles. Basically, if we subdivide it into motor, the topography is the anterior and the posterior lobe, and the motor system it affects through the gait and posture. The anterior lobe basically gait and posture, while the posterior lobe is with the multi-joint movement. So obviously we can expect that if something that is the anterior lobe is going to say gait and posture, then the manifestation will be ataxia. And in the posterior lobe where there is multi-joint movement, there will be dysarthria and limb dysmetria. The oculomotor division, flocculus, paraflocculus, and the nodulus, as well as the dorsal vermis and the fastigial nucleus. Okay, so these are, you can call them as the oculomotor division: the flocculus, the paraflocculus, and the nodulus, as well as the dorsal vermis and the fastigial nucleus. The flocculus, paraflocculus, and nodulus control of the vestibulo-ocular reflex and the smooth pursuit. So obviously, when there is any lesion over here, there will be impaired pursuit and gaze evoke nasalcus. And the dorsal vermis and fastigial nucleus, since they control the saccades, they will lead to saccadic dysmetria and opsoclonus. Cognitive is the posterior lobe and the dentate nucleus. And obviously, when the posterior lobe is concerned with the executive functions and the visuospatial, language, and memory, obviously with the dentate. So whenever there will be a lesion, there will be impaired executive functions, visuospatial disorientation, verbal fluency, and the visual memory. While the affective limbic system is associated with the posterior lobe verbal region and the fastigial nucleus. And obviously, as the name says, it is associated with the posterior lobe, the posterior verbal part, emotion and affect. And obviously, when there is a lesion, there will be living that's blunted or disinhibited behavior. Okay, I've just added this animation of the saccade. Saccade is a rapid conjugate eye movement that shifts the center of gaze from any one part of the visual field to another. Saccades are mainly used for orienting gaze towards an object of interest and maybe horizontal, vertical, or oblique. So you can see this is the saccade, a rapid conjugate eye movement that shifts the center of gaze from one part of the visual field to another. So basically, this is with the orientation of gaze towards an object of interest. So this is, you can see over here, it is trying to maintain this gaze towards the object of interest, which is over here. So this is the concept of saccade, a rapid conjugate movement, shifting to the center of the gaze and keeping the object of interest. The functional division, I know that this is going to be a little complicated, but don't worry about it. I have obviously a little complicated topic because there are several subdivisions. First you go into lobes, then you go into lobules, then you go into functional divisions. So I know this is a little complicated, but don't worry about it. You can just go through it in your books and you can just have it. Functional cerebellum is divided into three zones: the vestibular cerebellum, the cerebrocerebellum, and the spinocerebellum. Okay, we are going to read it. The vestibular cerebellum. What is vestibular cerebellum? The floccular nodular lobe is also referred to as the vestibular cerebellum. We have seen that floccular nodular lobe is located in really very small part. It mainly receives input from the ipsilateral vestibular nuclei, and additional input comes from the pretactal area of the midbrain and the visual cortex. Efferents from the floccular nodular lobe relays signal directly to the vestibular nuclei, bypassing the deep cerebellar nuclei. So this is an important thing to remember. So obviously, when you can see that it has got input from the vestibular area, and obviously with the eye is connected with the visual area as well, and the pretactal area, the visual cortex, etc. So you can expect what the function would be. This area is obviously responsible for balance and ocular movement. So while the medial part of the floccular nodular lobe, the nodulus, helps maintain the balance, the flocculus mediating the vestibular ocular adaptation contribute to the smooth pursuit eye movements that are that is following no moving object with one's eye. You are watching something, you are just trying to focus on that little moving object. Okay. So this is what is plotted over here. So vestibular cerebellum is a quick look. Floccular nodal lobe, also referred to as the archicerebellum, and it is the oldest part developmentally, that is phylogenetically. It maintains equilibrium, integrates the labyrinthine reflexes, and selective ablation abolishes the motion sickness problem. Okay, obviously this is obvious because it has good connection with the vestibular system. So it is associated with the motion sickness as well. The function of vestibular cerebellum is the maintenance of posture and equilibrium, maintenance of muscle tone, and these are the connections of the vestibular cerebellum with the otolith organ in semicircular canal, and it's going to inferior cerebral pedicle into the vestibular cerebellum, and to the fibers from cerebral fibers to the vestibular nuclei, and VSTNL and the medial longitudinal bundle and the vestibular spinal tract into spinal cord to the vestibular spinal tract and the medial longitudinal bundle into third, fourth, and the sixth perennial nerve nuclei, and integrating the labyrinthine reflexes. This is a vestibulo-ocular reflex, which is a reflex acting to stabilize the gaze during the head movement, with eye movement due to activation of the vestibular system. So that you know you are moving the head, but it is trying to stabilize the gaze. You can see over here, she's moving her head. Someone is moving her head, but there's a reflex that stabilizes her gaze. Okay, with eye movement, which how it stabilizes. Obviously, there is an eye movement. If she rotates it on the right side, the eyes do not go on the right side. Rather, they maintain their position. And how they sense it? They sense it through the vestibular activation of the vestibular system. So that's how she maintains the gaze. So the vestibulo-ocular reflex is a reflex that functions to stabilize the image on the retina during the head movement by causing the eyes to move in the opposite direction of the head. It's also a part of the vestibulo-ocular adaptation. We will later see there's something else about it also. Spinocerebellum made up of vermis and the paravermis. Intermediate portion of the cerebellar hemisphere. Obviously, paravermis means that is something that is surrounding the vermis. It is just lateral, and obviously intermediate portion is lateral to the vermis. The spinocerebellum receives somatosensory input from both the ipsilateral face through the trigeminal nucleus and the body through the dorsal column of the spinal cord, and it functions primarily in the coordination of the motor movement and the maintenance of the muscular tone. The vermis area coordinates the movement of the central body, the trunk head proximal limbs, as we have shown before. And the paravermis area coordinates movement from the distal limb, that is the arm, legs, fingers, and toes, like I have shown before. So now you can just integrate both of these findings here, and you can just have a good view that what part it controls. Usually, the vermis is the midline. Just remember that the midline axis part is controlled by the vermis, which is also located in the midline. And the lateral, as you go lateral, everything, the body goes lateral, so everything goes lateral from lateral to the vermis. The distal part, the distal leg the hand has a feet area is paravermis, and the coordination of the entire city in the cord. And the dorsal vermis, I think I have just intuited the dorsal vermis connect the fastigial nuclei, both of which modulate the saccadic eye movement that rapidly move both eyes from one object to another, and verges eye movement, moving both eyes away from each other to focus on an image at the distance opposite of divergence. Okay, divergence. The spinocerebellum has connection to the cerebrospinal tract. This modulates the musculature in the flexor muscles. Okay, this is important. As well as connection to the vestibulospinal tract, this modulates the musculature in the extensor muscles. Okay, so like we have said, that agonist and the antagonist. So this is a very beautiful balance between the agonist and the antagonist that leads to a coordinated movement. So it had both effect on the cerebrospinal tract as well as the vestibulospinal tract. While the cerebrospinal tract is associated with the flexion, the extension is associated with the vestibulospinal tract. So it basically modulates both of them so that the movement is basically balanced between these two. The function of spinocerebellum is error correction, smoothness, and coordination of the movement. This is the ballerina dancer. Showing, a spin on her pointy. She's choosing, you can see a lot of coordination from the midline to the periphery as well. She's maintaining her balance. You can see she's not dizzy at all. She's maintaining her balance very smoothly. The movement is extremely smooth. So some researchers performed research. There's something of my interest. Vestibular hippocampal function is enhanced and the brain structure altered in professional ballet dancers. So they noticed that the ballet dancers have a larger gray matter volume, gray matter, in the regions that contribute to balance and the spatial orientation abilities, such as the posterior cerebellum and the vermis, like we have discussed before. Insula hippocampal and the hippocampal area, when compared to the non-dancers, and effects in the opposite direction, the smaller gray matter were found in the cerebellar anterior lobe, which is not associated with this type of movement. So there is a whole lot of research on ballet in that way. Ballerina brain tests whole secrets to balance how they, silence the vestibular, vestibular information. And this is the VBM observed gray matter increment in the ballet group compared to the control groups you can see over here. So this is the for ballet dance, the VB analysis reveals significantly larger cluster bit after we correct gray areas. Okay, so you can just have a look over here. Posterior, basically areas within the posterior and inferior areas. It may be a little less fast for you. Just give it a include into cerebellum. New cerebellum, the cortical point of cerebellum. It is a recently, as the name says, new, recently developed, interact with the motor cortex, cerebellum. So you can have a great idea that is interacts with the motor cortex. Planning, programming, coordinated complex movement by regulating the sequence and timings of the movement. The function is obviously planning and programming of the movement, coordinate complex movement, sequence of movement, and timing of the movement. So these are the connections with the area of 6 and 4 of cerebral cortex to the pons, into new cerebellum, into the dentate nucleus that goes into the rad nucleus, and the element of the lateral ventricular nucleus of the thalamus, and then to the motor cortex. That's how it influences it. So at a glance, vestibulocerebellum, the maintenance of posture and equilibrium, maintenance of muscle tone, while the spinocerebellum, the error connection, smoothness and coordination of the voluntary muscles. New cerebellum, planning and programming of the movements, coordinate the complex movements, sequence of movements, and the timing of movements. So this is a quick overview. These are the figure skaters. Again, you can see when a figure skater learns a new move, a similar kind of process happens in the cerebellum. Their brain learns to expect when he tilts backwards on purpose, it will be accompanied by a falling sensation. So these are all of the things that have been integrated in the cerebellum and the vermin regions, as we have discussed before. So this is for you to remember that these are all the parts that have been the balance and coordination. And obviously, of these parts have been very well coordinated in the cerebellum. So these are the cerebral regions. After we have studied the functions, we can just go through, and there are a few things that you should remember, that all the regions of the cerebellum affects the same side, that is in contrary, it is totally opposite to that in the cerebellum, in the cerebral cortex. So with that controls the opposite side. Cerebellum controls the same side, ipsilateral lesion. No sensory loss at all, no true motor paralysis, intellect not impaired, symptoms disturbance of posture, tone, equilibrium, and coordination of voluntary muscles. That's what we have already studied. That mainly cerebellum is concerned with the posture, tone, equilibrium, and coordination of the voluntary muscles. So whenever there is lesion in the cerebellum, it will affect only these things. And as it does not have any part in the intellect, there will be no impairment of the intellect. There will be no true motor paralysis, because the execution of the motor function is not basic part. Is just you can say it filters or modifies or improves it, but it does not have a direct action on motor function. So a person is not like motorly paralyzed. So no sensory loss, again, no function of sensation over here. So if we just look at vaguely, or what we should remember actually clinically, is the sign of cerebellar lesion includes the scanning speech, intention tremor, nystagmus, and dysdiadochokinesia, dysmetria, decomposition of movement, uncan gait, asthenia, ataxia, atonia. Obviously, it also affects the tone, pendular knee jerk, rebound phenomenon, and vertigo. Examination. When we do the examination, what would you like to do? In upper limb, the finger nose test, the finger to finger test. We will also ask the patient to write something and do the buttoning. Adiadochokinesia, dysdiadochokinesia, lower limb heel knee test, walk on a straight line. This is the finger nose test. You can see this patient cannot touch from this. She's just pass pointing it. He's trying to touch this marker, but she cannot actually touch it, and she cannot maintain her movement. Normally, when you would do, a normal patient would go and touch this pen, she would not be, exceeding her movement. You can see she cannot touch it. She passes it by. It is the finger to finger test. Again, you can see this patient is trying to touch the finger. She's trying to the heel shin test. This is, heel shin test, but there's no abnormal finding over here. So you can see over here, I think it is clear to all of you. The intentional tremor, writing or buttoning, appearance positive movement during voluntary movement absent at rest. So this is important. They are absent at rest and they are basically intentional tremor. That's why you will ask them to do writing or buttoning. This diadochokinesia and ability to perform alternate movement rapidly. Okay, I couldn't find a video for this. Decomposition of movements, complex action involving more than one joint is split into several components. Like speech, you can see there is a staccato scanning speech due to this arthria. This is the gait. Walking on a straight line is not possible. This patient is having, is wobbling literally. So it is wide-based and staggering. When he was asked to walk on a straight line, you can say 1 foot in front of the other. He cannot walk it. He's constantly straggling and reeling towards the side of the lesion. It's lateral again. Hypotonia, reduction in muscular tone, pendular knee jerk, deep reflexes show pendular responses. I have a video for this. Rebound phenomenon, inability to put on a brake on the movement. Vertigo, dizziness, nystagmus, the movements of the eyeball towards the side of the lesion. This is the rebound phenomenon. You can see stevatome, flexion of the forearm against resistance with sudden release, normal reaction, prompt control, and normal reaction, insufficient control, dysmetra striking the head. He's trying to do this flexion of the forearm against resistance. You can see, and when he releases his forearm, he cannot maintain his arm like this, and he just rebounds this towards his own head. Otherwise, if you just hold it up and ask him to go against flex again resistance, and you just remove it, the arm will stay there. But if there's rebound phenomenon, if you ask him to flex against resistance and the patient do and you release, he will go and hit his head. This is a pendular knee jerk. This, normally this should be, if she should have just jerk, but she is having a pendular-like movement to and fro continuously. This is a pendular knee jerk. This is cerebellum syndrome, dysarthric speech, rebound phenomenon, like a finger nose coordination, fast pointing, impaired rapid alternating movement, dyssynergia, nystagmus, intention tremor, hypotonia, impaired heel shin test, ataxia with tendency to fall. Signs of the midline cerebellar disease, anterior and the posterior vermis, the floccular nodal dome, and the fastigial nuclei are associated with, again, it is the repetition, gait difficulty, twinkle, imbalance, abnormal head posture, and ocular motor dysfunction. Disorders of the stance and the gait, like I have shown before, wide base, irregular steps, midline or lateral cerebellar lesion, abnormal posture of the head tilt. Ocular motor dysfunction may be occurring associated with midline, but also with other parts of the cerebellum. The primary disorder of extraocular movement in midline cerebellum are the nystagmus and the ocular dysmetria. So the signs of lateral cerebellar disease are hypotonia, dysarthria, limb ataxia, that is appendicular ataxia, intention tremors, impaired check and balance, oculomotor disorders, limb ataxia, dysmetria, and decomposition of movements. As well, you can see the dysmetria consists of an error in trajectory and the speed of movement, like you can see from the finger nose test. You can just go into finger nose test, and you can see this is happening over here. Lateral cerebellar disease, undershoot or overshoot, pass point in the target, like we have shown in the video. To test the lower extremity, slide the heel smoothly down the shin. Frequent deviation to one side or the other are indicative of dysmetria in that limb. Actually, the patient cannot do like this, okay? He cannot just maintain this very beautiful coordination. So instead of doing this, like a heel shin test, this is the shin and this is the heel. When you are asking to do this, he cannot do this. He would like deviation over here or here. It's just a bizarre movement. I couldn't find the video of a good video for that one. But this is something that you can just go into the board and see yourself. This is, if you just once see, you will always remember. These are three of the discharge of cerebellar disease characterized by slow, labor, slurred, or garbled movement that may be mistaken, like cerebellar ataxia, as a manifestation of alcohol intoxication. In our countries, we do not have this type of thing very common, but you can just you should have this in your mind. Comprehension and grammar remain intact. Obviously, this is not the function of cerebellum. Hypotonia, lateral cerebellar lesion, best demonstrated by grasping the patient's forearm and shaking the relaxed wrist. Typically, the hypotonic limb is identified as the limb with more of a flail hand. So you cannot, like, if you are just shaking it up, it's like the flail thing, like it does not have a tone of its own. It's like something that is free to move. In addition, examination of the patellar reflex in the hypotonic limb may demonstrate an increased duration and amplitude of swing. This patellar cerebellar reflex should be distinguished from the clonus due to corticospinal tract disease, which occur at a more rapid rate than the patellar reflex. So this is something that you should keep in mind. Impaired check and balance. Impaired check response is characterized by the wide discussion reflected the limb falling and involuntary displacement of the limb of the time, that is the rebound phenomenon. This is the ocular dysmetria at the conjugate overshoot of a target with voluntary saccades. The eyes appear to jerk back and forth because of repeated inaccuracies in the saccadic movement intended to bring the target to the fovea. As we have discussed before, you can see these are the rapid jerky movements. You can see back and forth. Just watch it over again and you will have this thing. Disorder of cerebellum are associated with many types of nystagmus, and downbeat nystagmus is one of the most distinctive ones. Hypothesis bound to explain how DBN arise from cerebellar disease. It's likely that they are not mutually exclusive, as lesions in several different parts of cerebellum produce the DBN, including the parafocular complex and the nodulus. But atonic balance in the vestibular system is a common explanation, especially as there is inhibitory projections from the cerebellar focus to brainstem pathway that mediate the anterior semicircular canal rotational, the VOR, which produces the upper slow phase, but not the pathway mediate the posterior semicircular canal. So hypothetically, a tonic balance in pathways that mediate the up and down translation VOR would also produce the DBN, but it is downbeat nystagmus, but its properties should be different. These are the whole connections, how the downbeat nystagmus appears. This is the congenital acquired periodic alternating nystagmus. You can see it occurs in the cycle of left beating nystagmus, our transition phase, and the right beating nystagmus and further transition phase. Okay, so this is occurring over here. First in one side, then in the transition, then on the other side, and then it's a transition. The downbeat nystagmus, it is not being played. Characterized by pathological upward drift of gaze followed by corrective downward saccade. So most apparent when the patient is instructed to look downward to the either side. I think we cannot play this video. Okay, you can see this is the downbeat nystagmus over here. These are different nystagmuses, nystagmi rather. So this is basically, you are not going further. So if you just divide it into the, if there's a lesion of the nodulus and the uvula, there will be periodic alternative nystagmus, head shaking nystagmus, posterior nystagmus, and D and B. In the fastigial nucleus, ipsilateral hypometric saccades ipsidirectionally, hypometric saccadic contradirectionally, bilateral hypermetric saccade bidirectionally. In the flocculus, parafoculus, impaired gaze halting, gaze evoked downbeat and rebound nystagmus, impaired BR suppression, dorsal ipsilateral hypermetric, contrary to hypermetric saccades ipsilaterally. So these are complicated things. You should just remember that these are the saccades that are associated with this. These are the other nystagmus that we might skip it. Gaze evoked nystagmus, most commonly we perform it and see it. So gaze evoked nystagmus occur when an individual cannot maintain the conjugate eye deviation away from the mid position conjugate lateral gaze is accompanied by a slow involuntary drift of the eyes back to the mid position, followed by a rapid corrective return of the eyes to the laterally located target. The result is to and fro oscillation of the eye involving a fast component in the direction of the gaze and a slow component away. Rebound nystagmus, the nystagmus is being, direction of the nystagmus is also was a fast component. Rebound nystagmus specific for cerebellar disease, nystagmus that changes direction after sustained lateral gaze or after reflexation to the primary position. Opticokinetic nystagmus, normal phenomenon, becomes exaggerated, producing unusually large amplitude of both the fast and slow component. So this is the give evoked nystagmus. I want to show this. He's performing this test. He's asking to follow this pen, and he cannot actually. When he goes there, you can see there's a nystagmus. So this is the gaze evoked nystagmus. This is what we usually perform in our wards as well. You can see he is having this movement, constant movement. So whenever he's asked to go to the right, you can see this is the rebound nystagmus phenomenon over here. Proprioceptive abnormalities manifest by flutter, dysmetria, and instability of gaze, and the defect of vision, abandoned function manifests by abnormalities of the pursuit, vestibular suppression, opticokinetic responses, and nystagmus. This is the opsoclonus, constant random conjugate circuits of unequal amplitude in all the directions. You can see over here. Ocular flutter, defined as rapid to and fro oscillations of the eye. Not complete. The mechanism behind the cerebellar scissors, just keep that in mind that there are not proof scissors in cerebellum, okay? I was just a little iffy about adding this slide, but I wanted to make this clear. So I added the cerebellar of fit slide, but you have to be very, specific about it. So the mechanism behind cerebellar scissors are fits linked to the cerebellar herniation and brainstem compression. It is not of cortical origin. So keep that in mind. This is very, very important. Acute compression on the brainstem and acute increase in the ICP leads to tonsillary to axial rigidity with motor automatism, sometimes clearly characterized by decerebratory corticate paroxysmal posturing. The EG correlates is characterized by diffuse asynchronous low waves of variable amplitude and misrecognition of such entity until any incorporates therapeutic intervention in life-threatening situations. So for all the practical purposes, I know that this was a complicated jargon, especially the nystagmus types, but for you, just keep that in mind. The midline lesions affecting the cerebellar vermis and the midline cerebellar nuclei are more likely to demonstrate the truncal instability. The patient will not be able to maintain his erect posture. He will be like this, and the axial thing is cannot do this. So there will be truncal instability. While in the hemispheres, limb ataxias and dysmetrias will be seen. And all of this will be ipsilateral. So what you actually look for in practical life, you look at the patient, can he maintain posture? You ask him to speak and look for dysarthria. There is any, the spagato movement, speech, as I have mentioned. You check the eyes for nystagmus. You ask him to follow this, your finger or your pen, and you just look for this. Nystagmus, the eyes do different movements. Check the muscular tone. Look for the bandular knee jerk. Ask the patient to walk and look for the gait and deviation to any side to ask them to walk in a straight line. The cerebellar, I think this is, we have discussed what has come into, and again, phylogenetic divisions, archy, paleo, and new cerebellum. Okay, the archy cerebellum, which is known as the vestibular cerebellum, the oldest part. Amphibians still have this thing, and flocculonodal lobe and lingual are the archy cerebellum with the vestibular cerebellum, as we have discussed. Equilibrium, tone, and posture of the trunk muscles, we have discussed. Paleocerebellum, spinal cerebellum was the next one to appear, and tone, posture, and crude movement of limbs. New cerebellum, smooth performance of skilled voluntary movements, and this is the latest part to develop. These are the phylogenetic, this is the developmental division that we see. Embryologically, from metaencephalon, secondary physical, which is developed from the roof of the hindbrain. Now coming towards the intercerebellar nuclei. The one you can see in the yellow here, this is the yellow one. This is the dentate nucleus. The green one is the interposed nucleus. and the vestigial nucleus is the blue one. The dentate nucleus is responsible for planning, initiation, and control of the voluntary movements. Efferent fiber from this travel to the red nucleus to the contralateral ventrolateral thalamus, while the interposed nucleus, which is the globus and emboliform, we look at it over here, the green, send efferent fibers to the contralateral red nucleus, origin for the cerebrospinal tract that mainly influences the limb flexor muscles, while the vestigial one, the here in blue, efferents from the vermis, efferents via the inferior cerebellar peduncles to the vestibular nuclei. So you can here also appreciate dentate nucleus located over here, the nucleus interpositus, the globus and emboliform nucleus basically, and the vestigial nucleus over here. This is in the roof of the fourth ventricle. Intercerebellar nuclei, which are nothing but the masses of gray matter, impacting the white matter of the cerebellum on each side of the midline. From lateral to the medial, the nuclei are the dentate. Okay, you can see over here this dentate nucleus. This is something crumply or pouch-like appearance. These nuclei, the dentate one, and then you go into the emboliform. Okay, emboliform, this oval one is the emboliform. Then you go towards the globus nucleus, and the vestigial nucleus. They are composed of large multipolar neurons with simple branching dendrite. Axon from the cerebellar outflow in the superior and the inferior peduncles. This is the image. You can see this wavy appearance of the dentate, the globus and the emboliform nucleus, and the vestigial nucleus. These are the cerebellar output from the spinal cerebellum into the vestigial nucleus, into the medial descending system, into the motor execution process. The interposed nucleus goes through the lateral descending system into motor execution. Here from the cerebellum, the dentate, into area 4 and 6 of the cerebral cortex, motor planning, vestibular cerebellum, vestibular nuclei, and balance and eye movement, obviously. So this is a simplified version. This is the dentate nucleus. You can see over here, this is the axle, and this is as you see it, if you cut from it behind in the coronal way. It is the large cerebellar nuclei, the shape of a crumpled bag with the opening facing medially. You can see over here, opening, filled with white matter made up of efferent fibers that leave the nucleus to the opening to form a large part of the superior cerebellar peduncle, and it affects the voluntary motor activity, the timing, planning, and the inception. This is a scan. This is basically retention of the gadolinium over here, contrast. I just wanted to have you a clear idea of the location of the dentate nuclei. So this is not a very normal scan. This is basically retention of the gadolinium over here, but I just want you to have an image of where to find them. The emboliform nucleus, you can go over to the hilus of this of the dentate nucleus, and ovoid situated medially to the dentate nucleus, partially covering its hilus, belongs to the cerebellum, and nucleus receive fiber from the cerebellum and give fiber to the red nucleus by the superior cerebellar peduncle. The globus, one or more round distal groups, lie medial to the emboliform. Similar connection as emboliform and emboliform and globus known as together they are known as the nucleus interpositus. The vestigial, this is the most middle part, because in the midline, in the vermis, and close to the roof of the fourth ventricle, larger than the globus nucleus, situated in the midline, and the vermis and smaller than the dentate, but larger than the nucleus interpositus. Belongs to the archicerebellum, receiving efferents from the conveying, conveying efferents to the vestibular and the reticular nuclei. This is a sample of the brain, a human sample. So you can see over here the deep cerebellar nuclei. This is a matter, white, the white matter, and here you can see this gray matter nuclei located over here. So this is the structure of the cerebellar cortex. The gray matter of the cortex throughout its extent has a uniform structure and external molecular layer. Okay, you just go over here. This is the molecular layer, and then comes the Purkinje layer, and this is the granular layer. Okay, so this is the cortex. Basically, this is the cortex. You are going to here is the gray matter. This is the molecular layer. This is the Purkinje layer, and this is the granular layer over here. So this is when you go into this molecular layer, what you can find. It's also an image. The molecular layer have inhibitory interneurons which are GABAergic. There are the stellate and the basket cells, the flattened dendritic trees of Purkinje cells, and the parallel fibers originating from the granule cells. Purkinje cell bodies of the Purkinje cell in the Bregman glial cells, and then in the Purkinje layer is the Lugaro cells. This is basically the histology, the detailed histology. So we should not go over here. Or you can just see the granular layer, packed the granule cells with interneurons, which are mainly the Golgi. Unipolar breast cells are excitatory, Ligure cells are inhibitory interneurons. So here comes the molecular layer. We are not going into a lot of confusion over here. So this is something that may be more clearer to you. So what are you going to find is the layer of unmyelinated nerve fibers derived from the axon, the granule, stellate, and the basal cells, and the dendrites of the Purkinje and the Golgi cells. Okay, so you can see these flask-like structures. This is the Purkinje layer. Okay, these are the flask-like Purkinje cells, and these are their dendrites. These that are extending into the molecular layer. You can see this is a basket cell, and this is the stellate cell, the green ones. You can see that these other two cells over here, stellate cells, possesses short process and found scattered near the surface. The axon of these cells synapse with the dendrites of the Purkinje cells. Okay, you can see these are the Purkinje cells, and they have the dendrite that have multiple divisions. They divide profusely, and then the axons over here from the stellate cell, they synapse with the dendrites of the Purkinje cells. Basket cells contain little cytoplasm but have extensive processes, and the axon of the basket cells, they follow in transverse course. This is parallel to the cortical surface and synapse with the dendrites of the Purkinje cells. Again, you can see over here, this is a basket cell. They are going to the parallel way. You can see this is the cortical surface. They're going parallelly, and then they just make a connection over here with dendrites of the Purkinje cells. The Purkinje layer, you can see this is a Purkinje cell, the flask-shaped cell. This is the profound division of the dendrites. They are arranged in a single layer. The dendrites of these are seen to pass in the molecular layer where they undergo profuse branching. The primary and the secondary branches are smooth, and subsequent branches are covered by short, thick dendritic spines. And shown that these spines form the synaptic contacts with the parallel fibers derived from the granule cell axon. This is the granule cell axon. You can see these are the parallel fibers which are making connections with the dendrites of the Purkinje cell layer. So at the base of the Purkinje cell, this is the base. The axons arise and pass through the granular layer to enter the white matter. On entering the white matter, they acquire a myelin sheath, obviously, and it terminates by synapsing the cells of one of the intracerebellar nuclei, exerting the inhibitory influence on these nuclei. Basically, this is a balance of excitation and inhibition. The lateral branches of the Purkinje cell make synaptic contacts with the dendrites of the basket and the stellate cells, like we have seen before. The granule layer in the same area or in the distant folia, we have just seen this. A few of the Purkinje cells pass directly to endovestibular nuclei of the brainstem, and the Purkinje cell are the only output neuron in the cerebellar cortex. This is what we have discussed. The granular layer packed with small cells with densely staining nuclei and scanty cytoplasm. Each cell gives rise to 4 or 5 dendrites which make clock-like endings and have synaptic contact with the mossy fiber input. Okay, you can see this is the mossy fibers. The axon of each granule cell passes into the molecular layer where it bifurcates at a T junction like we have seen before. The branches running parallel to the long axis of the cerebellar folia, known as the parallel fibers, run at right angles to the dendritic processes of the Purkinje cells. These are the parallel fibers, you can see, and these are the Purkinje cells dendrites. These are parallel fibers. Most of the parallel fibers make synaptic contacts with the spinous process of the dendrites of the Purkinje cell. Okay, you can see this is granule cells. Granule cells, they are going into this. These are the parallel fibers, and these are the Purkinje cells, and there's a lot of connections over here. All intrinsic neurons except the granule cells are inhibitory, and such collection of inhibitory neuron is not found anywhere in the central nervous system except the cerebellum. So what about the white matter of cerebellum? The intrinsic fibers limited to cerebellum connect the different areas of cerebellum, either of the same or the 2 different hemispheres of the cerebellum. Afferent fibers that are coming towards the cerebellum are the afferent, the ones that the cerebellum receives. They acquire information from the cerebral cortex, spinal cord, vestibular apparatus, red nucleus and actin of the midbrain to the efferent, which leaves the cerebellum. Cerebellum provides output to red nucleus, thalamus, vestibular nuclei, and reticular formation through the efferent fibers via the Purkinje cells. This is the list of the tracks. These are the efferent tracks, efferent fibers, where do they come from the cortex. You can see over here, this is cerebral cortex. They are scanning cerebral cortex, everything going over here, and this is to the brainstem. This is the brainstem. This is spinal cord, and from here you can see from the brainstem, as the brainstem is connected to the cerebellum, the information relays into the cerebellum. The cerebellum receives input from the cerebral cortex to the corticopontocerebellar, cerebro-olivocerebellar, and cerebro-reticulocerebellar pathways, and receive information from the spinal cord through the anterior spinocerebellar, posterior spinocerebellar, and the cuneo-cerebellar tracts, and for that from the vestibular apparatus, either directly or after relaying in the vestibular nuclei. So the afferents are basically through the mossy and the climbing fibers, through the basically the middle and the inferior cerebral pedicle. The mossy fibers are the main afferents of the cerebellum, divided into 30 to 40 terminal swellings. This is the rosettes, which connect the dendrites of the granule cells and the axons of the Golgi cells. Okay, you can see this is the mossy fiber rosette. Okay, so as we have said, that they divide into 30 to 40 terminals. The rosettes, you can see over here, the rosettes. And this connects the dendrites of the granule cells and the axons of the Golgi cells. You can see the dendrites of the granule cells over here. These are the dendrites of the granule cells and the axons of the Golgi cells. The structure formed by the rosette along with the synapse of the granule and the Golgi cell is known as cerebellar glomerulus, which is spherical in shape, surrounded by a capsule of the neuroglial cells. One mossy fiber synapse with many granule cells, and each granule cell synapse with thousands of Purkinje cells, and the mossy fibers are excitatory. Climbing fibers in the inferior olive lead nucleus. Each fiber, after giving a collateral to the intracerebellar nuclei, synapse with the Purkinje cell. One climbing fiber synapse with a single Purkinje cell, contrary to the fact that one mossy fiber synapses with many granule cells, and each granule cell synapses with thousands of Purkinje cells. Thus, one climbing fiber influences one Purkinje cell, which while one mossy fiber, they had influence of many of Purkinje cells. So both climbing and mossy fibers have excitatory effects on the Purkinje cell. The climbing fibers which may directly excitatory contact with the Purkinje, mossy fibers terminate in the granule layer and make excitatory synaptic contacts mainly with granules. The efferent cerebellum provides output the red nucleus, thalamus, vestibular nuclei, and reticular formation to the efferent fibers by the Purkinje cells. The majority of axons of Purkinje cells synapse with the neurons into cerebellar nuclei, which in turn projects to the other parts of the nervous system. But few Purkinje cells from frontal nodal lobe and nervus directly and in the lateral vestibular nuclei. Efferent from the dentate and volume-forming lobus nuclei travel through superior cerebellar peduncle. The efferent from fastigial nucleus through the inferior cerebellar peduncle. The excitatory, inhibitory balance, and the intrinsic circuitry. All the afferent fibers to the cerebellum, which the climbing and the mossy fibers are excitatory to the cerebellum of the cortex, and their collaterals are also excitatory to the intracerebellar nuclei. The climbing fibers excite the Purkinje cell directly, but mossy fibers excite the Purkinje cells through the granule cells, which in turn excite vascular stellar cells, but vascular stellar cells inhibit the Purkinje cells. Mossy fibers, in addition, also excite the Golgi cells, which in turn inhibit the granule cells. Purkinje cells inhibit the intracerebellar nuclei, which in turn control the muscular activity through the motor radius of the brainstem and the cerebellar and the cerebral cortex. So this is all, a very good balance between the excitation and the inhibition. That's how it works to bring about this very good balance. The excitatory mossy fibers and the climbing fibers. This excitatory input is received by the Purkinje cells directly and indirectly. Inhibitory output of Purkinje cells to the deep cerebellar nuclei. And the excitatory input to the Purkinje cell is further modified by the inhibitory influence of the modulating interneuron. So basically it receives excitation through the mossy and the climbing fibers, and there is inhibition of the cerebellar nuclei, afferents and efferents. Again, mossy and climbing fiber afferent, efferent, the axons of Purkinje cells, the granule cells are excitatory. They use glutamate as the neurotransmitter. The stellate, basket, Golgi, and Purkinje cells are inhibitory, and they are GABAergic. These are the afferent pathways, the corticopontocerebellar and the cerebro-olivocerebellar from the frontal, parietal, temporal, and the occipital lobe. Destination where the pontine nuclei and the mossy fibers to the cerebellar cortex. These are the corticopontocerebellar, as we can see from the cortex, the pontine nuclei and mossy fibers, the cerebellar cortex, the cerebro-olivocerebellar climbing fibers to cerebellar cortex. Cerebello-reticulocerebellar, cerebro-reticulocerebellar are sensory-motor from the sensory-motor area, destination via the reticular formation, anterior and posterior spinocerebellar and the sphenocerebellar. They originate from the muscle spindles, the tendons, and joints, and via the mossy fibers to the cerebellar cortex. The vestibular nuclei from the utricle, saccule, semicircular canals, via the mossy fibers to the cortex of the vestigial, the flocculonodular lobe. Others, the red nucleus detectum into the cerebellar cortex. The circuitry, input of Purkinje cell is excitatory, output of Purkinje cell is inhibitory to the deep nucleus and the vestibular nucleus, and the output of deep nucleus is excitatory. These are the cerebellar particles. Again, can you see it? This is the, my cursor is a little crazy right now. The one in the red circle. This is the superior cerebellar particle. This one, which has been encircled with the green color, is the middle cerebellar particle. And this is the inferior cerebellar particle. The cerebellum is connected to the brainstem via the three cerebellar particles, superior, middle, and inferior. In addition to providing the anchorage, these particles allow afferent and efferent nerve fibers and tracts to enter and leave the cerebellum. So, as we can see, the superior cerebellar particle with the midbrain, this is the second largest one. The largest one is the middle cerebellar particle, which is associated with connection with the pons. This is the inferior cerebellar particle with medulla oblongata. This is the smallest one. This is DTI-based tractography. You can see over here, you know, as the red one. Can you see the red one? It's the middle cerebellar particle. The blue one, okay. The left superior cerebellar particle, the right in the green one, the right superior cerebellar particle. So this is what you are going to see through the image. Okay, this is, I guess this is quite clear. Obviously, the big one can be the middle cerebellar particle, and with here the superior located that is associated with the midbrain would be, obviously I would see this is the superior cerebellar particle. This is how you can see the ventral view when you remove the brainstem. What you see is this. Okay, this is obviously the vermis. This is the superior cerebellar particle. The blue one is the middle cerebellar particle. This is the inferior cerebellar particle. Okay, and this is again from the ventral side. You can see the white one is the nodulus. This is the flocculus, obviously. And obviously, this comes to the cerebellar tonsils. This is a very significant structure over here. The again, superior cerebellar particle, the middle cerebellar particle, and the inferior cerebellar particle. This is very small. Okay, this is flocculus, and this is nodule, and this is the tonsils. Obviously, surgical tonsils are very important. We will see in the later slides tonsils, nodule, flocculus. And if you go over here, this is the superior cerebellar particle. The large one in the middle, and this will be the inferior. Another image you can see here they have removed, you know, the cerebellum. It's the fourth of four ventricles that you are seeing over here. Superior cerebellar particle, the middle cerebellar particle. This is the one, the big one. The middle cerebellar particle, the inferior cerebellar particle over here. You can see superior cerebellar particle, the middle, and the inferior cerebellar particle. This is all you can see. We have already seen this picture, the superior cerebellar, and you can go into this inferior, and the big one is the middle cerebellar particle. The green one, superior cerebellar particle. This is the middle particle and the inferior particle. Okay, you can see over here as well. Cerebellar particle, superior cerebellar particle, the middle cerebellar particle, which is associated with the pons. Okay, and the inferior with the medulla. This is the inferior cerebellar particle. Superior is the output of the cerebral cortex, the middle one input from the pons, the pontine nuclei originating from the cerebral cortex. Again, inferior is the input from the vestibular nuclei, spinal cord, and the tegmentum. Moduli input from the inferior olivary nucleus, and monoaminergic afferents. Principal outputs from the cerebellum, cerebellar cortex into the deep nuclei, to the superior cerebellar pentacle into the ventrolateral nucleus of the thalamus, going to the cerebral cortex, and also from the deep nuclei into the red nucleus, and the vestibular nuclei, and the inferior and olivary complex. The superior cerebral pentacle, we have seen this before, is also referred to the brachium conjunctivum, sends upwards from the anterior cerebellar notch to the tectum of the midbrain. These peduncles form the supralateral boundary of the fourth ventricle. Is, you can see over here, this is supralateral boundary of the pedicle. Of the fourth ventricle, sorry, it conveys mainly the efferents. That is what leaves from the cerebellum, but goes from the cerebellum, the efferent. Arising in the dentate nucleus, blood supplies to the superior cerebellar artery. The superior cerebellar peduncle connects with the midbrain, mainly the efferent pathways. Only two efferents, anterior spinal cerebellum and the rubrocerebellus efferent, are from the major output arising from the dentate nucleus. Whilst the midbrain decussate to the opposite side as well, divide into ascending and the descending one, ascending fibers to the red nucleus in the thalamus, the descending in the olivary nucleus in the reticular formation. So these are the basically afferent and the efferent. The middle cerebellar particle. Okay, we can just have a look of quick look. Okay, sorry, that the afferent that are entering the cerebellum at the ventral spinocerebellar tract. This is through the to the superior cerebellar peduncle, the SCP. The entering cerebellum, the afferents, it's the ventral spinocerebellar, the rostrospinocerebellar, tectocerebellar, rubrocerebellar, trigeminal hypothalamocerebellar, and the cerebellocerebellar, and leaving the cerebellum at the cerebello-rubral, cerebello-thalamic, cerebello-reticular, cerebello-olivary, cerebello-nuclear, sometimes the hypothalamus thalamus. And these are basically a huge list of the fibers that you can go through. The middle peduncle, the brachium pontus, the largest of the three peduncles that we have seen before, consists principally of the afferents. That is what the input of the cerebellum bridges the basilar part of the pons, the cerebellar hemisphere, and supplied by the ICA, the anterior inferior cerebellar artery, and superior cerebellar artery, the SCA. The afferents, the pontocerebellar fibers, obviously the reticular cerebellar tract, and some serotogenic fibers of the raphe nuclei. There is no efferent. The inferior ICP peduncle connects the spinal cord and the medulla oblongata with cerebellum and comprises the largest restiform body and the smallest juxtarestiform, a smaller juxtarestiform body supplied by the pica, the posterior cerebellar artery. These are the list of afferents and the efferents. If the movement is to be carried out, cerebral cortex sends information to the anterior horn of the spinal cord to initiate movement, and also send impulses to the cerebellum about the movement to be executed. Cerebellum also receives the proprioception information from the muscles and joints about the actual movement taking place, and compares both of these information about the movement, and if any difference is noted in information concerning intended and actual movement, the cerebellum sends the information to the cerebral cortex and the interior horn cell of the spinal cord to correct the discrepancy so that the movement carried out is accurate in time, range, weight, force, direction. This is the blood supply of the cerebellum by the superior cerebellar artery and the ICA and the pica. ICA, the anterior inferior cerebellar artery, the pica, the posterior inferior cerebellar artery. This is, this is the distribution of the superior cerebellar artery. You can see this is in orangish red color. The ICA over here, this is the supply of the ICA is here. This is the pica supply. And the pica supply, and this little part is the ICA supply. This is just a little over here part is the ICA supply. This is the pica supply, and this is the SCA supply, the superior cerebellar, pica, and ICA. The superior cerebellar artery arises from the basilar artery, pica from the vertebral artery, ICA is also from the cerebellar artery. Basilar artery. The ICA supplies the flocculus and the anterior portion of cerebellar hemisphere. This is a very small supply over here. You can see this is the light pink one. This is the ICA. The ICA also gives all the labyrinthine artery to the interior, into the inner ear. I have added a case report of some ICA ischemia that you might be finding interesting. And this is the SCA, the rostral portion of cerebral hemisphere, and the upper portion of the vermis, and curves around the midbrain. It gives a branches segmentum as well. And this is the pica. This is the basal portion of the cerebellar hemisphere, the lower portion of the vermis, part of the cerebellar nucleus, the cortex of the fourth ventricle, the dorsal portion of the medulla. So basically, these supplies are important. Over here, you can see this is the pica one. This is the ica, the little one, and the one in the darker color, the dark color is the cerebellar artery. Basically, these are of importance in vascular surgery as well as in ischemia. You can see it's the pica one, this inferior surface and everything that I've discussed before. You can see this is the hypodense area. This is the pica stroke. This is the ica stroke, and this is the SCA distribution stroke. These are again the distributions that one should know in practice. The SCA stroke, if there's a region of the artery occlusion, it produces the classical presentation of ipsilateral, cerebellar, ataxia, dysarthria, and nystagmus, and the brainstem Horner syndromes associated with the contralateral associated sensory impairment. Interestingly, this was described initially by Mills over 100 years ago. Peripheral occlusion represented solely ipsilateral cerebellar signs. So this is important. Ica stroke generally lies from the caudal third of the basilar artery. Ica basically supplies the lateral pond, the inner ear, the middle cerebellar peduncle, and the anterior inferior cerebellum. And the stroke manifested as vertigo that can be central peripheral due to arterial supply. The most common symptoms associated with Ica and PAC, however, it's also associated with neurological signs symptoms like the facial weakness, hypoacusis, facial sensory loss, cross-sensory loss, gait ataxia, limb ataxia, and the Horner syndrome. The lateral inferior pontine syndrome caused by the ica affected structures, and the resultant deficits include the facial nucleus and intraaxial nerve fibers, and resulting in ipsilateral facial nerve paralysis, ipsilateral loss of taste from the anterior two-thirds of the tongue, ipsilateral loss of lacrimation and reduced salivation, and loss of corneal stapedial reflexes to the efferent limb. This is already disturbance of the prodrome of anterior cerebellar artery infarction. It's a case report. You should read it. It's a very interesting one. Like I have before described the vascular. This is the pica and the ica. Pica the lateral medullary syndrome, and the ica the lateral pontine syndrome, and how it causes the pica the lateral medullary syndrome that affects the spinothalamic and the spinal trigeminal nucleus, obviously leading to loss of pain and temperature sensation in the ipsilateral face in the contralateral body, and the vestibular nuclei will lead to vertigo, nausea, and vomiting. The nucleus ambiguous dysphagia, hoarseness, and decrease in gag reflex, inferior cerebellar peduncle that leads to ataxia, and dysmetry, asympathetic fibers that leads to ipsilateral Horner syndrome. The lateral pontine syndrome with the spinal trigeminal nucleus affected with loss of pain and temperature in the ipsilateral face, the vestibular nuclei again the vertigo, nausea, and vomiting, the cochlear nucleus ipsilateral hearing impairment, facial nerve ipsilateral facial paralysis with decreased taste of the anterior two-thirds of the tongue, decreased lacrimation and salivation, the inferior cerebellar peduncle ataxia, dysmetry, sympathetic fiber with the ipsilateral Horner. These are signs and symptoms seen both, typically seen in pica, typically seen in ica. The typically seen in pica, the hoarseness and saccadic, lateral pulsion, skew deviation, and vocal cord paralysis, saccadic, lateral pulsion, diameter of nuclear ambiguous and dorsal mutant nucleus. The ica, peculiar ones, tinnitus, hearing loss, and facial weakness, hearing loss, and facial weakness, and gaze palsy, caloric reduction ipsilaterally with the, this is the test. Damage of the inner ear, 8th grade nerve, 7th grade nerve, 7th 8th grade nerve, Ross root artery zone, 6th grade nucleus, flocculus in the middle cerebellar peduncle, the stroke, affecting the inferior cerebellar hemisphere and the inferior cerebellar peduncle, like we have discussed before in the directories, spinothalamic tract, sympathetic pathway, then in terms of the fifth cranial nerve, the trigeminal, vestibular nuclei, nucleus ambiguous, and ipsilateral findings will be Horner syndrome with facial hyperesthesia and thermoanesthesia, hemiataxia, and a palatal asymmetry with contralateral hemibody, hypoesthesia and thermoanesthesia, vertigo, hoarseness, and dysphagia. The lateral medullary syndrome of Wallenberg, pica syndrome, Horner syndrome, decreased pupil size, drooping eyelid, decreased sweating, double vision, slurs, speech, and as you can see over here, these are the structures that are affected here. The venous drainage of cerebellum, the superior cerebellar veins and the inferior cerebellar vein. The superior cerebellar veins directly into the straight sinus, and the internal cerebral veins transverse and the superior petrosal sinus. The inferior cerebellar veins into the transverse and superior petrosal and the occipital sinuses. This is the venous infarct, which has been caused by it, not very commonly seen, but anything. So what does a neurosurgeon say? How do you image? Obviously, neuro imaging typically involves the CT scan and the MRI scans. CT scan has the advantage that they can be done rapidly, help determine the immediate treatment upon initial presentation of the patient. You also see the bony things and also the hydrocephalus that you can see. You have a vague idea if there's an ischemic stroke or something, even of a mass effect or anything like that. You have a vague idea, but for a clear delineation of the soft tissue and the parenchyma, you have to go and see the MRI, which gives a better visualization of the posterior fossa and thus the imaging modality of choice for the patient with the suspected cerebellar lesion. These are the tumors in the adult cerebellum that are of interest. That pilocytic astrocytoma is basically a tumor of the younger adults in the first 2 decades of life. Vermis and hemisphere equally the equal distribution equally occurs in the vermis and the hemisphere. Imaging characteristics, the well circumscribed contrast enhancing often it is cystic, the mural nodule. Good survival and recommended UTR, which is very possible in it. Medulloblastoma, obviously we all know this is a grade 4 tumor. There's further, in the recent classification, you must have seen the genetic markers. It's very important. It is more hemispheric than in vermis. Variable definition. In imaging, variable enhancement, we have a cystic or a necrotic foci. UTR, this is gross total resection plus craniospinal radiotherapy. The posterior fossa boost is what is required. It is an invasively grade 4 tumor. Cerebellar liponeurocytoma, more hemispheric, with a minimal heterogeneous enhancement and motile appearance of hyperintensity. You will hear a hyperintensity of T1 and depicting areas of the fat signal. So that what basically it tells you. A gross total resection is a recommended treatment. Hemangioblastoma, another important thing, more hemispheric than vermis, and it is associated with the von Hippel-Lindau syndrome. It is very important for you to remember. Intense enhancement with flow whites and solid cystic with the mural nodule, but it has flow white because of vascular tumor. Although it is also like a cystic lesion with the mural nodule, like a pilocytic astrocytoma, but there will be flow white and it's a vascular tumor. Just keep that in mind. 5 years overall survival rate more than 50%. Gross total resection is a close follow-up and screening for von Hippel-Lindau syndrome, so that you can screen other lesions in the other parts of the body. The Laramate Diplos. It is a hemispheric lesion. CT low density with occasional calcification. MR tiger stripe in non-enhancing. GTR with screening for the Cowden syndrome. It is associated with the Cowden syndrome. Cerebellar osteocytoma, the pilocytic juvenile pilocytic astrocytoma, which is circumscribed astrocytic glioma. WHO grade 1 lesion. 75% case occur during the first 2 decades of life. Medulloblastoma is an embryonal tumor. 1.5% of primary CNS tumors. Malignant WHO grade 4. 70% in children under the age of 16. They are very common in children. About 20-30% of all the pediatric intracranial tumors and are rarely seen beyond the 5th decade of life. Liponeurocytoma is a rare one, primarily of adults in 5th or 6th decade. It was also lipomatous medulloblastoma, neurolipocytoma, metallocytoma, lipomatous neurocytoma. Previously, it was known by these names. The new widely accepted is the cerebellar liponeurocytoma with the low proliferative index and therefore favorable prognosis. Although it does not have any malignant transformation tendency, but it has a high rate of recurrence, about 50% in the meantime, to recurrence of approximately 10 years. So that's why, because it has a tendency to recur, they are designated as the WHO grade 4, grade 2. Hemangioblastoma, about 1% of all the intracranial tumors, but about 8% of posterior fossa tumors in adults, very slow growing, highly vascular, WHO grade 1, most frequently the cerebellum. However, they can be found in the brainstem with the spinal cord. 30% of the brainstem in the cerebellar hemangioblastoma have the multisystem cancer syndrome, which is the von Hippel-Lindau syndrome. Tend to be the VHL patients, von Hippel-Lindau, tend to be younger and have multiple hemangioblastomas at presentation. They develop numerous visceral lesions, which include the renal cell carcinoma, pancreatic islet cell tumors, pheochromocytoma, and the papillary cyst adenoma of the epididymis and broad matrices. CNS manifestation will include the endolymphatic sac tumors and multiple hemangioblastomas. The hemangioblastoma typically occur in the retina, brainstem, cerebellum, spinal cord, and nerve root. This is the von Hippel-Lindau spectrum. The cerebellar hemangioma is the CARP, the mnemonic, cerebellar hemangioma, retinal angioblastomas, renal cell carcinomas, pheochromocytomas, epithelial nodular tumor, and lymphatic cell tumors, and pancreatic endocrine tumor and cysts. So you have to, if you have a suspicion in a young patient with cerebellum angioblastoma, you must look for other parts of the body to look for, find these lesions. And we have a patient, we have seen such patients in real life as well. This is something that is very important for you to consider. The surgical approaches for cerebellum, the majority of tumors found in the cerebellum are amenable to hospital resection. Therefore, surgical management of such tumors varies more according to the tumor location than to the presumed tumor diagnosis. Warrior and hemispheric tumors that are close to the surface are easier to access surgically. Obviously, the deep-seated anterior ones are more difficult to reach and may require complicated operative approaches. I'm not going into a lot of complicated thing. I know that this could be a bit out of the scope of the lecture for the medical students as well, but you should know about this. You should have an idea of how it's been, what's the important surgical approach. So most cerebral tumors can be put via a suboccipital craniotomy or craniectomy. Craniotomy is basically elevation of the bone plan and replacement of the bone flap, while in craniectomy, you just remove and do not replace the bone. This midline or paramedian approach allows access to the lesion in the vermis and the hemispheres. The other thing important in suboccipital craniectomy is that it not only you can operate cerebellum here, but you can also take root to the fourth ventricle from the same craniotomy approach. So it is also important for you to have an idea of midline suboccipital craniotomy in order to know the route to the fourth ventricle. That is, it's also used for to reach the cerebellum, but also it can be used the same craniotomy. You can take the route or uvular tonsillar route or the transfermium route to reach the fourth ventricle. I will discuss it. We'll briefly touch it. In cases the tumor extends into the venous sinus, the brainstem, and the deep cerebellar nuclei, the complete section is obviously not possible without disabling deficits, and just debulk the tumor for decompression and the symptomatic relief. That's an appropriate step. That's an appropriate management decision that you can take. Pure navigation, it can be useful if there is localization and awareness of sinus, but unless a small distributed lesion has been approached, it is not necessity, since the anatomy is quite clear in this area, so you hardly need it. This is the histology that you should know. You are seeing this curve like this from a little inferiorly. So it is like health, like this, a little from below. This is the inion, the external occipital protuberance. This is the superior nuchal line. Why it is important? The inion is basically, it demarcates the trochlear, while the superior nuchal line is important for you to know the location of the transverse sinus. Okay, so this is what we need to know. The inion and the superior nuchal line. It is the suboccipital area. Asterion, as we have discussed, but this is more important when you are approaching the CP angle, the cerebellopontine angle, like for vestibular schwannomas. So it is located more laterally over here in the retrosigmoid approach, but I will just give it a little though for you because it has been given in the suboccipital description. So I just want you to have an idea, since I have just mentioned it somewhere. So that is the landmark on the lateral aspect of the skull by the junction of occipital bone, the temporal, and the parietal bone, and closed mastoid fontanelle basically signifies it. Related to transverse sigmoid sinus internally, and are not a reliable marker of the transverse sigmoid junction, so you have to be very careful. So it is located over here. I just wanted to give you an idea, but we are just discussing the suboccipital approach, the midline one over here in this presentation. So just keep your focus over here in the work, because it's the main workhouse. This is the lateral suboccipital. This is the midline, and this would be the paramedian, the lateral suboccipital that you will be having over here. But we are going to focus the midline suboccipital. The workhorse approach to the posterior fossa include the midline suboccipital and the lateral suboccipital, the retromastoid approaches, the retromastoid, where I also asked you about this, all this lateral approach in the asterion, etc. The supracerebellar anatomy is a modification, craniotomy is a modification of these approaches. So the indication of the midline suboccipital approach I have a video of this midline suboccipital approach as well. The midline suboccipital craniotomy, the preferred mode of exposure for the majority of Warmian, posterior, inferior, pontine, and medullary, and foramen magnum, midline, cerebellum, in the pineal region, whatever lies in this trajectory. You should have clear idea of this anatomy. The midline subcrani, in this midline approach, you can just go into this trajectory in the midline. And from the laterally, you have to just tailor according to the site. If it is laterally, then you have to tailor the craniotomy laterally. But for the midline one, you are going to expose this part, the Warmian area, majority, posterior, inferior, pontine, and the medullary area, the part of the foramen magnum that is here and not the anterior one. The anterior one will be from the other approach. The midline, cerebellum, and the pineal regions. The most common indication for the midline subcraniotomy is the developmental abnormality, the Carrari malformation, the posterior fossa tumors like masts, meningiomas, and ependymomas, histiocytomas, and medulloblastomas. Vascular lesion like aneurysms, cavernous malformation, and AVMs. Pineal regions through the supracerebellar corridor. For the lesion extending from the posterior fossa into the middle fossa, a supracerebellar transtentorial combined middle and posterior fossa craniotomy is recommended. This is a video. I just took it from the Neurosurgical Atlas. This is basically a, I guess, 14 minutes long. Okay, I can just, if you want it, I can play it, or we can just describe it briefly. Midline suboccipital craniotomy, the position, prone, sitting, or park bench position. Sitting position is defined by many people that it gives you a very good bloodless field and obviously drains the CSF, but sitting position is very, it's not very easy. And I haven't seen anyone in my experience using it, but some people are very well versed with sitting position. The other important thing is the air embolism problem over here. So park bench or prone position, more is neurosurgeon point of view. Linear incision, you can see the short horizontal marks the location of the transverse sinus. You can see, note the patient's shoulder is mobilized anteriorly. So you open it in the midline to deep place and to the level of the suboccipital bone along the midline avascular facial planes. It is important to stay within the midline avascular plane to avoid postoperative neck pain. The muscles attaching to the sphenoidal line are disconnected to the monopolar cautery, and the muscles are elevated from the underlying occipital bone. The another important thing that I want to say is that if you do not replace the bone flap over here, it is okay because the muscles overlying it are very strong. So this is very important. However, it's important to have a watertight closure in this area. The dural closure should be very watertight. So if basically you are just going into midline and then you apply this retraction. So this is how, these are the Rani clips. We do not use Rani clips in our setup, but they are commonly used and they're very good. And they also put hemostasis at the site. This is through the monopolar cautery. It's a Bowie. You are just trying to elevate the muscles. And this is, and that's how you do this very good dissection. Just try to be in the midline, in the avascular plane. Burr holes are placed on either side of the midline keel. Midline keel, when you open this suboccipital bone, there's a prominent area, the keel-like area, keel of the shape like this area. So both on the sides, and this is how you can see you have elevated this bone flap. We use craniectomy. We remove this bone. We do not replace the bone flap in our setup. That's what we have seen. The dura is open in a Y-shaped manner. You can see it's a Y-shaped manner with a more inferior extension for lateral mobilization of the dural flap. The superior limb of the dural incision extends to the inferior aspect of the transverse sinus. For the midline lesion, the dura may be open along the midline. This maneuver facilitates the watertight dural closure. So when you open the dura, that's what you see. This is the suboccipital surface. This is the posterior cerebellar incisura. This is suboccipital surface. You can see the parameter uvula from here, the tonsils here. This is a very common part. Most of the time you just see them. This is the cerebellomedullary fissure. This artery from below coming here is a pieca, and this is the bioventral album. Dural closure should be watertight, and you may need to place a bone flap as the overlying muscle are. You may not need to place a bone flap. significant routes that you can take. Opening the arachnoid membrane and trabeculae along the cerebellar brainstem fissure, as in the telovelar or the transcerebellomedullary fissure approaches, was originally proposed to access the pineal region, the cranial nerve 5, the trigeminal nerve, and the fourth ventricle. Moreover, several safe entry zones have been proposed and used for the lesions inside the brainstem that are based on opening of the three cerebellar brainstem fissures and or the adjacent cerebellar fissures to expose the cerebellar peduncles and the brainstem surface hidden by the parts of the cerebellum forming the walls of the three cerebellar brainstem fissures. To maximize the chances of safe and precise removal of these lesions, sufficient exposure of the brainstem surface is critical, as is in selection of an appropriate entry corridor into the brainstem. Brainstem is covered by the cerebellum, so to gain access, we need to dissect around the cerebellum safely. To read the brainstem, the cerebellum brainstem fissures need to be described here. Most of the three major cerebellar arteries, veins, and vital neurostructures, include the majority of the cranial nerves, and all the three cerebellar peduncles are located inside or close to these fissures. Basically, I want to just go through into this surgical anatomy that lies around the cerebellum and lies between, basically, between the cerebellum and the brainstem. Just it is a brief thing. Okay, this is something that I wanted. It should be in the previous slides before this route, but this is mistakenly placed over here. This is the incision, hockey stick incision, inverted J, is used for lesions that are more than 2.5 centimeter in the cerebellar hemisphere CPA, where getting the muscles out of it will facilitate the maneuvering. So instead of the midline, you just rotate it into this hockey stick manner. So this is different, and this is surgical fissures which I am going to will be sharing in the later slides. The approach to the fourth ventricle, the transfemoral or preferably the telovelar approach may be used to reach the fourth ventricular lesion. The arachnoid overlying the cisterna magna may be open to drain the CSF and achieve brain relaxation. This is very important. This is performed even in whenever you just open the sphincter. It releases brain relaxation with the CSF. Depending upon the pathology at hand, the arachnoid over the midline is dissected using an arachnoid knife and a micro scissors. You can see over here, this is how he's releasing it. The transfemoral or preferably the telovelar approach may be used to reach the fourth ventricle. You see, in the telovelar approach, you just have to retract the brain, the cerebellum. But in the transfemoral approach, you have to, make insights through the cerebellum. So transference is not preferable when you have to go through the telovelar approach, which actually use the national brains and therefore is less destructive. Lesions in the foramen of Lashka are reachable, and the rostral extent of the intraventricular exposure can be expanded by a more flexible inferior to superior working angle through a C1 laminectomy. So indication, the fourth ventricular region like epidemoma, medulloblastoma, the hemangioblastomas, MATs, exophytic brainstem tumors, choroid plexus papillomas, cavernous malformations, and aviums, arteriovenous malformations. Because of iliquosis of the fourth ventricular floor, various cranial palsies may occur from the resection of the underlying pathology affecting the floor. Appropriate patient selection, telovelar approach, standard midline craniotomy, like we have discussed before. The craniotomy narrower than that for the one for the hemispheric lesion, towards the craniotomy for carried decompression. It exposes the medial quarter to half of the hemisphere laterally. The foramen of magnum is removed inferiorly. The transverse sinus do not need to be exposed through during this approach. The principal technique for the telovelar route involves incision with the patella choroidea and the inferior medullary velum, which form the lower half, the roof of the lateral ventricle. The lower virus is retracted to expose the fourth ventricle. You just retract like this, as you can see over here. After the exposure of the inferior cerebellar surface in the upper brainstem, the uvulotonsillar and the medullotonsillar spaces are dissected open. The section plane between the medial edge of the tonsil and the adjacent edge of uvula developed. The medial surface of tonsil is then retracted supralaterally. Uvula is retracted supramedially and exposed. You expose the patella choroidea and the inferior medullary velum. Micro scissors are used to prevent blunt dissection and protect the pike of branches. This is a portion often attained without sacrificing the vermis, but minor transection of the vermis, you can see this is a very small part. This part, very small. It may be required, maybe occasionally, if the section plane along the cerebellum medullary fissure and uvulotonsillar spaces are adherent. Next, the patella choroidea and inferior medullary velum are coagulated and divided in the transfemoral approach. You instead of retraction, you have to transect the inferior vermis to a larger extent, used for larger lesions that occupy the rostral, fourth ventricle, and do not extend into the lateral recess. The disadvantage is exposure is limited to the midline only, and the vermis must be divided. The vermis split syndrome with that manifests with nystagmus, the gait disturbance, oscillation of head and neck, the truncal ataxia, and disturbance in equilibrium. When it takes place, in addition, pediatric patients may suffer from cerebellar mutism. I will discuss it also. Cerebellar brainstem fissures. These are the basically the surgical importance. The area between cerebellum and the brainstem. The cerebellum mesencephalic, cerebellopontine, and cerebellomedullary area. The cerebellum mesencephalic fissure. The opening aperture then bomb is variation of the supracerebellar, infratentorial, and occipital transtentorial superior transvelar approaches. Cerebellum mesencephalic fissure referred to the precentral cerebellum. Okay, I'll go through it rapidly. This is the cerebellopontine and petrosal fissure, cerebellomedullary and tonsillar biventral lesion. You can just read this paper. This is okay. We are now going into this congenital malformations. The Chiari malformation, although it can be quiet to some extent, but it is a congenital problem where the cerebellum extends down into the spinal canal, blocking the flow of CSF. Chiari malformation are a group of defects associated with congenital caudal displacement of the cerebellum and the brainstem. You can see over here the low lying of cerebellar tonsil, and this is the syrinx. This is syrinx that you can see in the spinal cord. Chiari malformation is basically the herniation of cerebellar tonsils into the cervical spinal cord. From the foramen magnum, normally the cerebellar tonsil line no more than 3 mm below, and the cutoff line is 5 mm below. The treatment depends. Okay, so the asymptomatic may be left alone, but usually you have to perform some type of decompression, or you can only just remove the bone, or you can expand the space by performing a duroplasty, that is a dural patch that you may be required. The goals of surgery are optimal decompression of the nerve tissue, reconstruction of the normal CSF flow around it. Is a Chiari malformation. You are just trying to, this is basically herniation of tonsil. You can see over here, when you remove the bone, you decompress the brain, and you can see that this will be fine. It's a duroplasty, where you apply a dura patch after removing the bone, and you give space so that you just correct this. You just treat this. This is a Chiari malformation with thoracic series of surgical decompression, midline suboccipital approach. You just open it, you just remove the bone over it, decompress it, and you put
That's okay. I think the Wi-Fi slowed down a little bit. Just hang on. It'll come back. Yeah, hi, Ahmed.
That
Hi,
was Zainab,
Joe.
sir.
Okay, she's coming back on, I think.
Okay, sir.
Just wait for NOOR. Yeah, I think everybody knows about Wi-Fi. Sometimes it slows down. So we'll just, actually, she fell off, but she'll be back. So this is a digital coffee break. We have
She
nothing
told
to
me
serve. Go ahead.
I mean, she told me that she has, a problem in the network. Okay, so she tried to join us soon.
I'm sorry, Ahmed. Is she coming back?
Yeah, she tries. She tries to join us soon.
Okay.
I mean, there is
Okay, we'll
problem.
just wait. We'll just wait. Just like in a
Okay.
conference, the coffee breaks at 10, 15 minutes sometimes. So take a minute or two, check your email. Check your Facebook Messenger. Greetings, Takashi.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
Welcome.
From Japan, Takashi-kun, Tokyo, Japan. It's now 3 a.m. I'm good right now, but it's very interesting and informative lecture.
Well, dedicated professional, 3 o'clock in the morning in Japan. And to the people in the panel, Takashi is a Japanese translator. As you can see, he's 3 o'clock in the morning. He's pretty dedicated. He's not translating this one, but he translates to lots of them. So
Very interesting.
yeah, cerebellum. Do you use a lot of those posterior approaches, Takashi?
Yes, I'm using some posterior fossa surgery. Exactly, I'm in the brain tumor. The gliomas, posterior fossa is very rare, but metastatic brain tumor, I frequently use this approach. So it's very informative to understand the anatomy, and detailed anatomy is very informative. So it's good for my review.
Oh, so sometimes you go after metastases in
Yes,
that area?
yeah. We use brain metastasis, larger tumor, posterior fossa approach.
Where are they primary from? The ovary and lung? Where's the
Lung,
primary? The
breast.
Mets to the brain.
Mets is the lung or breast, colon.
Colon?
Yes.
So what's the indications for going after those metastases? If it starts affecting the brain, if the tumor is palliative, just to relieve the person, right?
Sometimes it is symptomatic, larger than 3 centimeters. Yes, and it becomes symptomatic diameter and not effective for gamma knife surgery. For posterior fossa brain edema, due to brain edema and compression of brainstem, to avoid the herniation.
Yeah,
So
and that's an emergency. It's almost like an emergency,
thinking
right?
of, the patient's prognosis is
Okay, Noor, excuse me,
so
Noor's
it's
back.
a-
All right, it's all yours, Noor.
Okay, actually, I had a network issue in my laptop. I had just to restart it through so I'm online with my, with my mobile device. I can just continue, or if you like, I can just do it a second session, whatever you like. I have my presentation in my mobile phone as well.
Okay, let me know when you want to wrap up.
No, it's up to you. Up to Ahmad Al-Ghanimi if he wants that to have a separate, sitting where we discuss. I have the Carrari malformation and the Walter Dandy, variants of this continuum. The Dandy Walker.
Yeah, sure. Well, we can do that. I think we've gone long enough. I think we need to open it up for questions. What do you think, Ahmed?
I guess we can go schedule another lecture to accompany
Yeah,
the
okay.
lecture.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Okay. Okay, I guess Ahmed will open it up for questions or comments.
So
Yeah,
as you whatever you would like, I would just post it. So just let me know.
We'll do another one. Let's
Sure.
start now with the comments and questions, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, Ahmed, let's.
And also the competition results.
yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll do that before we end, of course. That's why everybody came. So all artists. Okay. Any comments or questions from the panel? Dr. Jalal, do you want to check in? Zainab, Jalal? I noticed you jumped in before.
Yes, hey, good evening.
Hi,
From here,
Zainab.
good morning, good afternoon to everyone.
Greetings, Zainab.
Yes, ma'am,
Where you from, Zainab? You've told me before, I know.
Zainab is a medical student.
No, ma'am, I'm a doctor already. I'm doing my residency in neurosurgery.
Oh, that's good. That's amazing.
Yes, ma'am.
Where are you from? Where are you from?
I'm from West Africa, the Gambia.
Oh, but well, I
Gambia,
know.
and yet I had to look up on the map where it was. It's a thin sliver of a country in West Africa.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it's a wonderful place. I've seen a few pictures. I know about Gambia. So, how is it like to be in Gambia? How's the neurosurgery for women over there?
Um, I left the country about 2 to 3 years ago, and we only have basically one neurosurgeon that I know of. So the situation is really not good. We keep referring patients to Senegal, that's our neighboring country, and treatment over there can be very expensive.
Oh,
So basically, we have so many doctors, but people try to run away from neurosurgery because it's demanding, you know already.
yeah, I know.
It's so demanding and everything. So because of that, I just decided to join him and help. Maybe the little I contribute is gonna help my country a lot.
Yeah, exactly. That's great thing. That's great thing. I was discussing the matters before with somebody else, and I was saying that just don't try to feel discouraged, even if circumstances are not very favorable for you. But just keep going, keep exerting, keep putting your maximum best. So I think you are doing great. So best wishes from my side to yours, and I think you will excel.
Thank you so
Inshallah.
much.
Okay, Noor, I bet you, Noor, you'd never be able to guess where the Gambia was. You see where it is? It's
Oh my
between
God, this is
Senegal, between Senegal and Guinea, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
over
sir.
there. Just look at they've got the coastline there, so that's beautiful place to be because they have this a little delta like thing over there.
Okay, we'll
Really
talk
is.
about it in the lounge. Okay, any more comments or questions from the panelists? Or anyone that just wants to say hi? We met Takashi.
Yeah,
Okay.
very interesting.
Dr. Kashi.
Yeah, good evening. And now I'm Dr. Kom from Tokyo, Japan.
Yes.
It's 3 a.m., but I'm waking up. A very interesting lecture. Thank you. The very detailed anatomy is very important for cerebral anatomy. And yes, so it's very informative.
Thank you so much. I was just trying to be elaborate, but I think that while I try to keep it a little short and comprehensive, but still I think that get into a little more extensive. But I was just trying my best to make it possible for everyone to just understand and correlate it, especially with the radiograms and with the surgical anatomy. So I'm happy that you liked it.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
it's very important for them. So.
Now, do you want to do the art contest? Is Ahmed, are you going to do that? Ahmed, are you there? I guess Ahmed sponsored an art contest, or was that you, Noor? Was that your idea, Noor? Or
Yeah, it was my idea, and I and Ahmad were discussing this previously, so we have actually chosen and discussed the winners. Ahmad, would you like to announce?
let's have a drum roll. Let's have a drum roll.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ahmed.
Yeah, I want to just see the drawings and the results of the competition.
Okay.
Okay, how are we going to work this? You're going to show the piece of art, or what's going on?
Ahmad, do you have the pictures? Do you have the results? Do you have the slides?
Okay, do you want me show the picture?
Okay, or just to try to whatever the way you like to. If you want to just announce the names, then just announce the names of the winners, because we had two categories. One was for the colored images, and the other one was the black and white pencil sketches. So the first prize goes to Riham from Yemen for the colored picture, and the first prize goes for the black and white pencil drawing was to Heather Suleiman from Pakistan. The other one is there was second image color drawing. Ahmed, this was from Yemen. Just
Okay, can you show the pieces? Can you show the pieces of art, please?
Yep. Thank you.
Look, there are other pictures sent to me during the lecture. Okay, I'm gonna show you some.
Okay, so you can't show the picture. Oh, you're gonna show them now.
Oh,
Okay.
sure, sure.
Oh, okay, great, great. Okay, there's prize number 1 or 2.
No, but this is
It's a new one.
updated. Yeah, this is
It's-
new.
This is a new one. Yes, I haven't seen it before.
And who was done by, who did this one?
This sent by Asma from Yemen.
Well, that's a nice
Okay.
picture.
The name, Kanjemi, let me, can you once again, can you spell it or say the name? What's the name again?
Asma.
Asma.
Okay,
Asma.
Yeah, her name is Asma. Yeah.
Asma.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good. And the other prize, was there was another prize too, or just
Hi,
one?
sir.
You wanna just see, just a minute. You can go ahead, Noor.
As you can tell, we're super organized.
Actually, this picture is a new one. We had other pictures, and the first one I have just said that it was from Riham in Yemen, and the black and white sketch was from Pakistan. The other second prize was given to a colored picture that we show the name, the black and white.
Okay. Okay, I guess we're not doing that one. Okay, okay, Noor, I guess we're ready to wrap up, Ahmed. And then we're gonna, okay, I want to just explain about the Zoom lounge. Okay, now we have a feature called the Zoom lounge where after the meeting, the panelists and Noor are welcome to come to this Zoom to kind of interact informally, because it's not televised, it's not recorded, it's a private Zoom. It's for you to get to meet Noor and meet Ahmed and meet the other students, and it's private. So I put the link in the Zoom in the chat. Please copy that link and go there after this Zoom ends, because you can't be on 2 Zooms at the same time. Leave this Zoom and go to that Zoom. So copy it right now, because we're about to end.
Oh yes, just trying to. Ahmed, have you retrieved the names and the slides?
Yeah, just copy that link, Noor, and we'll see you in that room. But you have to leave this first. So I'm going to end this, but make sure you copy that link before I end it. Okay. I'm going to end it. I'm going to end this Zoom, but copy that link before I end. Okay.
Okay.
And that's what you go into after you get off this. So everyone copy that link real quick. It's in the chat. Just copy that, and then we can meet in the Zoom informally. We're trying to increase the interactivity. So we're doing that.
Hello, Sir Alberto.
Okay.
Hi,
Hola, doctora. Felicitaciones.
Oh,
Se lució.
gracias.
Very well.
Hey, Alberto, venga al lounge, okay? Hay una otra charla, Alberto, en la lounge de Zoom.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Venga a este Zoom, okay? Okay, we're going to end now. We'll see you in the lounge.
Thank you. I'm going there.
Thank you very much, Noor. Excellent. And thanks for your effort. Thank you.